Once upon a time, in the silence, a light wind swayed the trees, picking up fallen leaves. Birds flew high in the sky. In this piece, the main character reflected on his desire to live easily, carefree, without burdening himself with unnecessary things. Rest is the most important thing for a man, and he has always valued it. It is worth working at 60–80% of your capabilities, not at full. Giving all your strength at 100% is a waste that takes away the most valuable thing, time. After years of hard work like a pack horse, he finally got his reward. 16 days of paid vacation. Without hesitation, he went abroad and enjoyed dinner at a famous restaurant. The bus, which was rolling calmly along the stone road, suddenly veered to the side through a pothole in the road. The driver skillfully turned the steering wheel, and the boy with the tablet in his hands staggered, losing his balance. Passers-by stopped, staring in shock as the bus broke through a section of the stone road. Thus ended the protagonist's short life, or so he thought. When he came to, the boy saw a dazzling sight before him, soft rays of sunlight piercing through the clouds. His gaze froze in amazement at this unearthly beauty. Such a picture only confused him. Where was he? What was happening? Why was he here? He was sure that he had died under the wheels of a bus. And now, he was alive and conscious. Clouds swirled all around him, and a halo of sunshine appeared right in front of him, with a female figure in the center. From there came a voice that must have belonged to the stranger. "Are you awake?" The soul of the deceased tried to understand who was standing before him, but the girl herself confirmed his guess. She was an observer, watching over the balance in the galaxy. She was also called a goddess. The soul asked about the reason for her appearance. She immediately confirmed the fact of his death, but added that each deceased is given a choice of 3 paths to further existence. The first option is to go to heaven. The second is to return to Earth, but in a new body. The third is to be reborn in a completely different world, full of secrets and the unknown. Despite his confusion, the soul noticed that the goddess was in a hurry, as if she wanted to end this dialogue as soon as possible. This caused him to think a little. Hearing his thoughts, the goddess smiled faintly and admitted that she was indeed in a bit of a hurry. When the soul asked if she could ask a few questions, she agreed. After all, he was dealing with a goddess. The soul wanted to know more about the other world, the same one she had mentioned in the 3rd version. The goddess smiled again and began her story. Artoria is a wondrous world full of natural wealth and adventure. It is home to 108 labyrinths full of treasure, where brave warriors travel in groups in search of glory and loot. When the inhabitants turn 5, they undergo a baptismal ceremony, after which they receive blessings and abilities. But the world is dangerous, monsters live here, and social inequality is very real. After listening to the goddess's story, the soul understood that in his previous life, he was looking for a new hobby, and if he were to enter the same world again, there would be no change. So he declared he wanted to be reborn. The goddess opened her arms, smiled gently again, and accepted his choice. She also stated that she could grant him any power he desired for his new life. But the soul refused supernatural abilities. He did not want conflicts and jealousy. The only thing he asked for was a strong and healthy body. This answer surprised even the goddess. After that, he asked if she often spoke to souls like this. The goddess answered clearly, very rarely. This is a special case, not like the others. She explained that when she was 5, a boy had rescued a kitten that turned out to be her offspring. So now she wanted to personally thank the rescuer for this kind deed. After listening to this story, the soul thought, many believe that pity does not achieve anything. But the goddess, laughing, expressed the hope that he would no longer believe in this false belief. Stretching her hand out to the radiant form of the soul, the goddess wished him a bright and happy life. Her voice was filled with warm sincerity and farewell peace. Some time passed. The clouds in the sky parted, revealing the sun. The rays gently fell on a small village surrounded by fields. Everything around breathed peace and life. The breeze swayed the trees around the stone house, the windows closed with wooden shutters. Inside, hunched over a cradle, stood a man and a woman, the new parents of a baby. The pretty girl smiled sincerely, greeted the child in the morning, and gently asked how he was feeling. And the bearded man, introducing himself as the father, called his son a sweet boy. The boy, his mouth open, stared at these two. The new parents he had seen as soon as he opened his eyes. The smile that appeared on his face was still a little awkward and uncertain. Touched by her son's smile, Emrea crossed her arms over her chest and invited Lark to take the child in her arms. The man did not refuse and proudly said that their son would grow up strong, just like him. While his parents were rejoicing at his first smile, the boy's mind was filled with thoughts. He was a baby. This was logical after rebirth, but the complete loss of control over his body caused considerable discomfort. In the small house, standing alone on the side of the path, surrounded by the forest, there was a happy laughter. Inside it, a new family gave each other warmth. A new life had begun. In this world, the soul was born with the name Owl. A baby is not able to control itself. When hungry, it cries. When tired or full, it falls asleep. Thoughts do not matter, because the body obeys only instincts. The life of a baby is a constant struggle with limitations. Mom's name was Empria. She had an angelic beauty, although, perhaps, all mothers are the most beautiful. And the father, named Lark, although not particularly intelligent, was definitely better than the despotic father from the past life. After spending a few days in his new body, Owl learned that his family were ordinary farmers. Thanks to a good harvest, they were not in danger for the time being. But in Artoria, farmers were mostly considered poor, although they lived peacefully. But the most important discovery came one evening. Mother, looking out into the street, shouted that it was getting dark. Her voice carried through the village, attracting Owl's attention. Stretching her arms forward, Emrea calmly uttered, "Light." And a snow-white ball flashed in her palms, shining with a soft light, a simple action, and within it lay a true miracle. The soul watched in fascination as the happy parents rejoiced at the successful spell. A small light illuminated the house, and it was at that moment that Owl realized, magic really does exist in this world. The idea of magicians was formed from images of people in pointed hats with balls of energy in their hands. Without the ability to cast spells, why was there any point in reincarnation? Magic was what gave meaning to this new life. Frowning and staring into the glowing fire, Owl began to think feverishly about how to activate the magic. He needed to try to create something immediately, even the tiniest spark. Obviously, witchcraft required a certain resource. And although he didn't know what it was, his feeling told him that it all started from within. The main thing was to concentrate and feel it in his body. But the excessive tension of thoughts led to an unexpected result. The baby's body could not stand it, and Owl simply fell asleep, losing consciousness in the midst of concentration. Some time passed, but the situation did not change. Every time he began to concentrate, his body immediately turned off. But despite this, the main tasks remained the same: to sleep and eat. But Owl was not going to give up. Finally, after trying and struggling, he felt a source inside him. A small lump of energy was located in the center of his stomach. It was weak but real, and he knew it for sure. At that moment, the boy realized that he could use magic by channeling this energy. But as soon as he tried to do something, his body fell back into sleep, destroying all his grandiose plans. The seasons have changed. Winter has turned to spring. It's been half a year since he was born into the new world. But during that time, he's only known how to eat, sleep, and practice magic. When will he finally grow up? But the training had paid off. Although he didn't know how to cast spells yet, he had already learned to feel the magic throughout his body. It was exhausting, but it was an important step forward. The progress was obvious. It was the perfect moment to practice. Remembering his mother saying, "Light," Owl focused and mentally repeated the spell. He didn't speak the words. It was all in his mind. But the child's body couldn't take it anymore. This time it reacted naturally. The baby turned red. He needed help. The mother just smiled happily and started changing the diapers. Of course, nothing worked. But the guy didn't expect instant success. He firmly decided there was plenty of time, so he could take his time and just stubbornly continue on, without giving up. Morning, afternoon, evening, night. Again and again he tried to utter the spell "light." But nothing happened, no matter how many times he repeated the actions after his mother. Why doesn't anything work? Owl didn't understand. And then he decided, maybe it's not worth copying his mother. It's better to imagine another source of light, a bright lamp from a past life, something like an LED. And it was the right move. He didn't need to copy others. He just needed to remember familiar things from his world and imagine how they worked. Maybe this ability was his trick? But it didn't matter anymore. Now he could use magic. Smiling, Owl raised his fist joyfully, like a true victor in the battle with his own helplessness. Now all he had to do was practice. And with practice, his magic would probably grow. Imagining a fan blowing from his hands, Owl created a light breeze, a small storm around him. Even if he already understood the basics of his magic, there was still a lot ahead. He had to do something real, something meaningful. Only then would his abilities become something more than just a baby's plaything. Happily stretching and yawning, Owl slowly fell asleep. Because no matter how you look at it, he was still a baby. His mother, entering the room, was surprised to notice that it had become suspiciously cool inside. 5 years have passed. Owl has grown noticeably, and his parents are eagerly preparing for his baptism. Such an event is difficult to miss. It is a special day in the fate of every child in Artoria. Waving happily, Owl said goodbye to his parents and headed off to the ceremony. Today, all 5-year-old children underwent the rite of baptism, a symbol of welcoming the world and receiving God's blessing. In this world, blessings determine a person's future. Among hundreds of gifts, you can receive something as weak as something so powerful that it allows you to found your own state. However, Al believed that any blessing was not useless. It was rather a pleasant bonus to life. Therefore, he was not particularly worried. It all reminded him of the gacha games from the old world. A little girl greeted Ol with a sincere smile. It was Mirai, his first childhood friend. They lived next door and became friends immediately, regardless of anything. Although Mirai was a year older, she was like a little sister to Ol. They played 3 times a week, and each time they met, they smiled happily at each other, holding hands. The children were standing near the local church and excitedly discussing an important event. The day of Ol's baptism, which he had been waiting for so long, had finally arrived. As it turned out, Mirai didn't just come to play. She wanted to say something important, which surprised her friend a little. He didn't expect a serious conversation right now. A childhood friend had warned him not to tell anyone about his blessing. All seemed to know this, but he laughed anyway and admitted that he didn't think it was such a taboo subject. Pretending not to understand, he asked, "Why can't we talk about blessings?" This confused Mirai. It seemed she didn't know the exact reason herself. Even more embarrassed, the girl exclaimed that, "It's just not possible, that's all." In fact, the reason was simple. To avoid shame or pride among children, it was forbidden to talk about force. The sun was shining, and a baptism ceremony was taking place in a small church. The priest stood at the altar, and Owl, bent down on one knee, prepared to accept his new destiny. Standing up after the greeting, the boy with blonde hair looked at the priest, who asked if he was ready. Owl confidently replied, "We can begin." Raising his hand above the boy's head, the priest blessed him with the words, "May the grace of God the Creator be with you." The priest's palm shone with a bright light. A blinding glow enveloped Owl's body. Every cell seemed to be permeated with an unknown force. His entire being was filled with an energy he had never felt before. Even after the ritual was over, his body continued to radiate light. A surge of power surged within him. The feeling was new and frightening at the same time. Is this a blessing? Closing his eyes, Owl tried to focus on his sensations, and in the silence of his own consciousness, he saw the name of his ability appear. It clearly emerged in his imagination. Suddenly, the word moderation popped into his head. The boy's face froze in silent surprise. He wanted to ask the priest, but then he remembered that he couldn't talk about blessings. What he had received described his past life more than his new strength. A cold thought came to him. Maybe God hated him? All could not shake the bitterness in his soul. Tears were quietly flowing down his cheeks. Someone would be happy with such a gift, but the boy's heart was clenching. Only in time would he realize how important this seemingly modest ability would turn out to be. Returning home joyfully, the first thing Al did was tell his parents that he had finally received his blessing. He hoped that they would rejoice with him. Having met their son with smiles, the parents immediately decided to prepare a festive dinner in honor of this important event. The house was filled with a joyful anticipation of a family feast. Crouching down in front of his son, Lark gently patted him on the head and said that every blessing had its own value. It should be accepted and not devalued. Laughing happily, his father added that no matter what blessing he had received, he should be proud of it. However, Owl sensed a note of comfort in his father's words, not pride. Time passed. A flock of birds flew over the treetops, followed by the shadows of the Rocky Mountains. And in the very center of the forest stood a short boy, full of determination. Concentrating on his inner feelings, Owl created a ball of magical energy in his hands. Saying, "Wind ball," he released it, and the tree in front of him shattered into pieces. Amazed by the result, Owl realized that he had finally mastered the magic of wind. From now on, another element was added to his arsenal, along with fire, water, lightning, space, earth, and ice. As he examined the fragments of the tree, he felt his magic grow stronger and his exhaustion lessen. All of this was the fruit of his persistent training, which had continued since he was a baby. Inspired by his achievement, Owl had no plans to stop. He decided to continue his training, focusing on the types of magic that would be useful in living his dream. Thinking for a long time about how to describe the desired attribute, he remembered his old belt bag. The idea came by itself. You just need to clearly imagine it. Concentrating and saying, "Space for objects," Owl opened a crack in front of him, revealing emptiness, an absolutely pure, invisible inner space. Delighted with the result, the boy decided to test it. He placed it in the split stick, and it instantly disappeared as soon as it touched the edge of the magical vault. It was a perfect result. He now has a storage space where time passes differently. The food and items placed there will stay fresh. Returning home after training, Owl saw a real feast on the table. There were plenty of dishes, buns, meat, and vegetables. The table was bursting with delicious food. He was delighted with such a variety of dishes. Mom cheerfully announced, "Tonight for dinner, well-roasted meat, and he can eat as much as he wants, without restrictions." The well-bird is a weak monster that lives almost everywhere, but even it is not easy to deal with it alone. It usually takes 3 people to go after it. Its meat is very valuable among farmers, because it tastes like chicken. A year ago, the boy shared a recipe for this bird with his mother. He suggested coating the meat in breadcrumbs and frying it in oil. Emreya immediately got the hang of it and prepared the dish without a single mistake. Unfortunately, there were no seasonings like soy sauce in this world, only plain salt. And although Al could not recreate his favorite dish from the past, he set himself a goal: to invent all the spices he knew in the new world. In the house where our hero lived, there was always fresh homemade bread dough and vegetables, all grown with love, by their own hands. Their family was engaged in agriculture, so the products were not only tasty, but also filled with warmth. If the buns were made with homemade yeast, Emreya promised that when her son brought the bride, he would definitely teach her the family bread recipe, which had been passed down in their family from generation to generation. After dinner began, father and son began praising their mother's culinary skills almost simultaneously. She only slightly lost her cool and offered more toppings, not hiding her joy at such praise. There was always laughter and warmth in Owl's house, and this day was no exception. After dinner, the boy fell onto his bed and groaned. Although he was growing, he still had to know the measure. Overeating is not always good. If only he knew how to use magic that activated cells and removed toxins, cured diseases. That's right, healing magic. It would make his life much easier, especially after a heavy dinner. And indeed, as soon as he used the spell, the heaviness in his stomach disappeared, as if he had been in a hot spring. After such a miraculous recovery, he could go to sleep peacefully. However, he couldn't fall asleep completely. Al heard his parents' anxious conversations. This year, due to crop diseases, the winter could be difficult. There was anxiety and restlessness in his parents' voices. There was a commotion coming from the door as his parents discussed how to survive the winter. Lark decided to hunt monsters to earn money. It was dangerous, but he saw no other way out. Emreya, bowing her head, asked her husband, "What will happen to them if he doesn't return from hunting one day?" Her voice was filled with anxiety and fear for her family. The next morning, Owl went out into the field, thinking, "Children shouldn't hear such conversations because they can't help. But that doesn't mean he'll stay away." Remembering yesterday's healing spell, he decided to test it on young wheat sprouts. After the spell, both the boy's body and the plants glowed with a soft light. The name of the magic seemed strange to him, but he decided not to dwell on it. Even if nothing works out, it's worth a try. And if he's lucky, he might be able to make money from it. Meanwhile, a girl with long hair was happily humming to herself on the road. Seeing the familiar figure of Mirai, she joyfully shouted her name but suddenly stopped mid-sentence. What she saw made her instinctively hide behind the house. She watched Owl with amazement and admiration. Was this real magic? How did he manage to do it? Peering around the corner in confusion, she suddenly found herself thinking, why was Owl using magic on her family's field? Curiosity and slight confusion crept into her heart. Feeling satisfied with what he had accomplished, Owl fell to the soft ground and stretched out in the field. He managed to help Paul and his friend's family, but it tired him out, and even more so, he became hungry. The memory of last night's dinner made him smile. But a growing body needs animal protein. It's hard for farmers to afford meat. This thought prompted him to get up. Sitting down, he again voiced his desire to eat meat. Such a thought in a child's mind could lead to completely unexpected consequences, and it seems did. A wild boar-like creature, with strange mushrooms on its back, was strolling leisurely through the forest. Little did he know that a pair of shining eyes were watching him intently. The wild boar could reach 2 meters in length. Its meat is delicious, but the real value is in the mushrooms that grow on its back and head, a real delicacy. The new hunter's little head was filled with thoughts of juicy meat. He immediately decided that if the hunt was successful, his mother would be happy too, even if he had to kill for it. In hunting, strategy is key. Fire or lightning magic will burn everything, while water and ice will ruin the taste. You have to think smartly, because the prey may be more valuable than it seems. The choice was obvious. Using wind magic, Owl destroyed his prey with one blow. The boar didn't even have time to make a sound, it was all over in an instant. Satisfied with the result, the boy decided that wind magic was the perfect option for hunting. Approaching the carcass, he first carefully gathered the mushrooms, and then washed away the blood with magic. Sighing heavily, Owl was surprised at his own composure. It seemed that he had already completely gotten used to the structure of the new world and learned to live by its rules. At first glance, he could only roughly estimate the carcass's weight, about half a ton, and the question immediately arose. How would he explain to his mother that he had killed such a gigantic wild boar all by himself? Smiling lightly at his thoughts, the young hunter decided not to make excuses. It was better to simply tell the truth, no matter how strange it might be. let it be as it may. Unfortunately, the boy's optimism was quickly shattered by harsh reality. His mother looked at him with such a penetrating gaze that Al immediately understood that the consequences of his action were yet to come. Sitting on his knees, Al listened to the sermon about how worried his parents were when something might happen to him. His mother remembered how many times she had asked him to stay as far away from monsters as possible. But changing her anger to mercy, Emrea praised her son for his honesty and asked him not to hide anything anymore. And most importantly, to listen when his mother says something is dangerous somewhere. Surprised by this change in mood, Owl smiled guiltily and, agreeing with her, sincerely apologized for his actions. Smiling with her whole face, Emrea gently touched his nose with her finger and said that he had scared her very much. It would be better not to do that again. Having finished the educational conversation, she drew attention to the prey brought and suggested that they finally get down to disassembling and preparing it. The table was once again bursting with food, but the main course of the evening was wild boar meat, juicy with steaming drops of juice dripping straight onto the plate. As he tasted the dish, Owl noted that the people were not lying. The mushrooms were indeed delicious. The soup made from them was aromatic, and the boar meat was excellent even without any spices. During dinner, Lark unexpectedly raised an important question. When exactly did his son learn to use magic? After pausing for a moment, Owl answered simply. The skills appeared after receiving a blessing. His father took this for granted and did not suspect anything wrong. Quickly closing the subject, Owl thought, now he had a cover for using magic. Still, no one but him knew the true nature of his gift. However, a new question immediately arose. Why did he need magic? This confused the boy himself, because he had never thought about it deeply. After a moment of thought, Owl decided, magic is necessary to live happily, carefree, and secure. Nothing else is needed, and of this he was convinced. Laughing at his son's answer, Lark apologized for the strange questions, but suddenly changed his tone to serious and asked him to remember something. His face became stern. He said, if you use power only to harm others, it is no longer a gift, but a crime. And such a path does not lead to the light. But in a moment, Lark smiled again, praised the dinner, and his mother joined in the conversation and said, now let's eat before it gets cold. This change in mood only whetted his appetite. Al took another bite of the delicious dish, not hiding his pleasure. Although night had already fallen outside, thoughts were swirling in the hero's head. Had he become too carried away by magic? Would he one day go astray? And yet he was happy to be born into this family. In his past life, his relationship with his parents was tense. But here, there was warmth, support, and true family happiness. Turning on his side, Al thought, could it be that the goddess had a hand in this? Her smiling figure appeared in his imagination, silently demanding a little more gratitude. Eventually, the words of their parents came true. All the fields of the village were struck by disease, and the farmers were left without a harvest. But only the family of Owl and Mishura was able to escape this disaster. Despite his love of magic, Owl did not forget that he was a farmer. It was time to truly learn how to farm the land so that he could grow his own spices. Closing his eyes from pleasant memories, the boy dreamed of making soy sauce, miso paste, and most importantly of extracting sugar. He wanted to grow all of this himself. Once he enthusiastically told his parents that he wanted to have his own field. The idea of growing sugar beets or sugar cane haunted him. The mother thought about it, remembering the neglected garden. Then Al immediately asked for permission to use it. When he received permission, he beamed. His dream became closer. However, as soon as the boy saw that weed-covered patch of land, his enthusiasm noticeably faded. Everything looked abandoned and unsuitable for a child's work. Assessing the scope of the work, he thought grimly, this is definitely not the best place for a 5-year-old boy to develop. But in the end, he decided that his mother probably didn't take him seriously. Gathering his strength, Owl said to himself, it's too early to give up. And so it was time for magic. The first spell, the wind cutter, cut the overgrown grass with a thin blade. Then came the turn of more complex spells. Levitation helped to almost uproot the trees. An earthquake leveled the surface. He did not stop for a moment. Later, breathing heavily, Owl fell to the ground and looked at what he had done with satisfaction. In a short time, he had completely transformed the area and felt like a true creator. After that, the boy fell completely to the ground, groaning in exhaustion. He had used too much magic in a short time. It was seriously exhausting even his trained body. But the result he achieved only thanks to witchcraft confirmed one thing. He had truly grown. If he continued to develop in the same spirit, he would become even stronger. After resting, the young farmer grabbed a hoe that was almost as big as him and immediately began the next stage, physical labor on the land. As he eagerly implemented the next part of the plan, Ol was mentally happy. Digging in the soil was actually enjoyable. It was one of the best parts of a real farmer's life. One should start with weeding. clearing the land of weeds, and then sow it with seeds. However, at this very moment the flow of joyful thoughts suddenly stopped. Seeds? This simple word threw him into a stupor. All had completely forgotten that in order to sow something, you had to have, in fact, seeds, and he hadn't taken that into account. Upon returning home, the first thing the future farmer did was go to his father to find out. Is it even possible to get sugar beet seeds in this world? Lark answered directly. These seeds are known, but no farmer in their kingdom has been able to grow them. The boy was truly surprised. Hearing the answer, Owl was upset. His plan was starting to fall apart before it even started. He hadn't even had time to try it, and obstacles had already appeared. Seeing his son's disappointment, Lark remembered that merchants from another country would soon arrive in the village. Perhaps they would have these seeds, or at least be able to bring them. These words ignited new hope in the boy's heart. Merchants. Even if they didn't have the seed, he could ask them to get it for him by the next time he came. His father immediately warned that the goods of such travelers were expensive, and they might not be able to afford such a purchase. But that didn't stop Owl. He wanted not only seeds, but also adventures. Patting his restless son on the head, Lark smiled. Let's go together, listen to the merchants, and maybe you'll find what you're looking for. So the night came, and the next day, Owl decided, if there is no money, it does not mean that there is nothing to pay with. You can always exchange something for what you need. Nuts, medicinal herbs, wild boar mushrooms, all this is valued by merchants, but today's goal was different, although Owl really loved meat. The wood deer is a monster similar to the forest deer, but of the highest rank in their forests. Its antlers are used in medicine and are extremely expensive. Standing in the forest, Owl used detection magic. Thin lines filled with energy spread out from his feet. They covered the entire forest like a net. This spell created a network of intersecting lines and circles. It was designed to search for living things. It was like a sonar, but it worked through magical vibrations. The spell picked up even the slightest vibrations, but there was no deer nearby. Was there really nothing worth noting around? But suddenly he caught the signal of a boar. Without wasting any time searching further, the boy set out to intercept the boar. He would deal with it first and only then return to the deer. The forest was filled with familiar sounds, birds singing, insects chirping. The wind swayed the treetops, and the young hunter quietly stalked his prey. A few minutes later he spotted the boar, but it stood motionless. Owl hid behind a tree, hesitating. The animal didn't move. Was it really asleep? To make sure, the boy took a few cautious steps forward. But as soon as he got closer, his eyes widened in shock. Before him stood a giant brown bear, a rare animal for these forests, and it was he who was about to feast on the same boar that had become Owl's target. The hidden bear is not just a predator. It lives in the mountains, has an elongated body, is extremely aggressive, and is capable of destroying an entire village. But worst of all, it is difficult to detect. But now he was engrossed in his meal, so Owl had a chance. If he didn't give himself away and attacked unexpectedly, he could win. Jumping sharply from cover, Owl shouted, "Wind cutter!" And two blades flew out of his hands, cutting through everything on the way to the target. To the boy's surprise, the bear had noticed the attack. It crossed its paws in front of it, preparing to take the blow. And indeed, the blades did not harm it. Only currents of wind rose around the bear. Its skin was so thick that Owl wondered if it even felt magic. The beast growled menacingly. Accelerating to insane speed, the monster rushed at the boy, breaking through trees. While the distance was still sufficient, a solution had to be urgently found. If the bear caught up with Owl, his life would be over. He didn't like that option. Putting his hands on the ground, the boy raised a stone wall in front of him. But it didn't become an obstacle. After the first blow, cracks appeared in the thick clay cement partition. The village froze, half a meter of wall, and the bear breaks through it so easily. The most important thing now is to stay calm. If you act wisely, even such an angry opponent can be defeated. You need to concentrate and think. With a furious roar, the bear broke through the barrier. But at the same moment, Owl activated a new spell. Pit. The earth disappeared from under the beast's paws, and he instantly fell into the depths. The massive body fell down with a dull thud. The monster still tried to roar, but Owl was already preparing a new spell, this time a final one. A waterfall crashed down on the bear, a powerful stream that filled the entire pit. A human would hardly have been able to escape from such captivity. Although the beast fought in the water, it was still alive. Then Owl ended the fight with a stone fall. Mountains of stones fell from above. The end was inevitable. After the collapse, silence fell. Nothing could be heard from under the stones. Even if the beast had drowned, that would have been enough. But it was better to make sure. Owl pulled on his hat and exhaled. Taking a deep breath, he realized how dangerous this battle was. His strength was almost exhausted, and he decided it was too early to fight such monsters. But despite the danger, the bear is valuable prey. Owl pulled the carcass from under the rubble and used magic to clean it of the blood. Everything had to look decent. The boy returned home alive, but he couldn't escape fate. Behind the cart lay the carcass of a rare bear, and his mother would see it. Emrea was worried, but she soberly assessed the situation. She and her father agreed that surviving an encounter with such a monster was a stroke of luck. Only adventurers of rank C and above could handle it. Hearing this, Owl assumed that his magic was roughly on par with the power of the sea adventurers. He wasn't sure if that was a good or bad thing, but at least he had a starting point. Examining the carcass, the parents noticed that the skin was in perfect condition. It could make a good living. Such quality is rare. The rich will pay big bucks for a stuffed toy or a cloak with high camouflage ratings. Almost any body part can be used, unless meat is too smelly. Jumping up, All asked if there would be enough money for sugar beet seeds after the sale. Lark smiled. There would be some left over. Smiling in response, the boy declared he would give the rest of the money to his parents. This touched Lark. A smile and a quiet thank you flashed across his face. But a stern voice interrupted their idyll. Emrea reminded her that she was still angry. The conversation was not over yet, and her son should remember that. Dusk was slowly falling on the village. The hunt was successful. There would be enough money for seeds. And perhaps there would be something interesting to be found at the merchants. The anticipation of morning was exciting. The next morning, a storm was raging in the village. The bells were still ringing. The farmers were already in the fields. It was time to plow, and this day was to be special. But it wasn't just the bells that were making noise. Merchants were bustling around the square, setting out their wares. Owl and his father came out to meet them, greeting one of them warmly. A stranger with long hair and clothes that didn't fit the place warmly greeted his old friend. Their conversation immediately turned businesslike. Seeds, product evaluation, conditions. Seeing the specified goods, the man glanced aside in surprise. Because this trophy turned out to be a bear, a huge one, on a cart. The merchant did not expect such a catch. Lark smiled and immediately began a fictional story. They say that the beast fell into the trap itself and died, and he accidentally found the carcass. The merchant looked closely at the monster. An obvious lie. The hidden bears are too smart to fall for the villagers' trap. But why would Lark lie so blatantly? The merchant's gaze returned again, this time to the boy. Owl caught his eyes and smiled happily, not suspecting what thoughts were already swarming in the merchant's head. For some reason, the boy seemed unusual to him. Something about him alarmed him. The merchant almost immediately assumed that this was the child who had defeated the monster. But a child can't defeat a monster. Can he? The merchant didn't want to understand. He knew one thing. Lark wouldn't steal someone else's loot. So there was a deal. After some thought, the merchant admitted. The carcass was of excellent quality, no damage. The entire body was fit for use. He offered 100 gold pieces for it. This amount shocked Owl. There wasn't a single gold coin in the village, and if you converted them into yen, it was 10,000 for one. It was the first time he had seen such money. The idea of 1,000,000 yen for one bear captivated the boy. If he continued hunting, he could quickly become rich. In Owl's dreams, gold coins were already falling from the sky. The stream of enthusiastic fantasies was interrupted by the voice of his father, who asked LeBron not to play with prices and reminded him that it was not the first time he had bought from him. The merchant mumbled awkwardly that he couldn't fool Lark. Lark, smiling coldly, replied that although he was poor, he wasn't stupid. He knew the true value of the carcass. Surrendering under pressure, Lebrant laid out 2 bags of gold on the table. 170 coins, the most he could give for the bear. It was all fair, but there was a residue. Realizing that he had almost been cheated, Owl decided he needed to study the prices in this world. Otherwise, he would earn gold without understanding the true value of things. With a look of resentment, he promised himself not to be so naive again. At that time, his father completed the deal. Owl immediately lit up as soon as he heard about the sugar beet seeds. The merchant was surprised by such an unusual request and noted that such seeds are rare. Few people grow them because it is too difficult even for experienced farmers. However, he began to look, remembering that he must have at least 1 bag. Lark calmly explained that it was his son's idea and he had come up with it all himself. Having taken out the desired bag, Lebrant set a price. 20 gold. Expensive. But the boy who had just received what he wanted was already jumping somewhere on the other side of the market, while the adults continued their conversation. After thinking, Lark asked his son if he wanted anything else, and he got an instant answer. All needed a knife. For a hunter, a knife is a must-have. To process prey, skin it, cook food, and if the magic runs out, to protect yourself. It's not a luxury, but a survival tool. Lark paled slightly, imagining what Emrea would say. She would definitely not be thrilled. But the gleam in his son's eyes was a real weapon of mass destruction. The merchant instantly got his bearings and offered several options for knives, for different tasks, made of different materials. Owl's eyes shone even brighter. Unable to choose, this boy simply said, "I want them all." His father was shocked, but he could not refuse. The only condition was to never tell his mother about it. Her anger is a terrible force. After buying the knives, Lark said he had something else to discuss with the merchant. The boy was invited to walk around the market on his own and look at the other goods. Walking between the stalls, Owl examined the goods, when suddenly his gaze stopped. Something familiar. He couldn't believe his eyes. Could something like this be here? His cheeks flushed in delight at what he saw. Joy and excitement mingled. And that was how his trip to the trading floor ended, unexpectedly and extremely successfully. The pocket and the clay jar were filled to the brim. They were soybeans with yeast. The seller gave the yeast for free. All didn't know why, but he thanked him sincerely. Now he could make miso and soy sauce. Closing his eyes, the boy whispered, "The highlight of the day." And then, not holding back his emotions, he joyfully exclaimed, "It's sugar beets!" In this world, sugar is an extremely expensive commodity, and the method of its production is a closely guarded secret. Farmers can only dream of the sweet stuff. Even Lebrant didn't have it for sale. But Owl was not going to put up with this injustice. He wants sweets, donuts, cookies, cupcakes. All this must appear in his world. Beets are a common root vegetable. In fact, they are not at all difficult to grow if you follow certain tricks and know the soil characteristics. First of all, you need to take care of the beds. Beets rot if they are flooded, so you need to organize proper drainage of water, not only rainwater, but also soil water. In addition, beets do not like acidic soils. To improve the conditions, you can add rice husks or shells. If everything is done correctly, the plant will grow. Gathering magical energy in his palms, Owl thought, if magic exists in this world, it must be used. Why not accelerate the growth of beets? Pointing to the prepared beds, he activated the spell. A magical stream spread across the ground, covering every inch of the planting. First, small sprouts appeared, then medium-sized stalks. The spell worked. The beetroot took root, grew, and looked very promising. Deciding to improve the taste as well, Owl used some additional magic. And to test the effectiveness, he decided to conduct a small experiment with watering. He watered some of the beets with magical water, and some with ordinary water from an old well. Now it remained to see which would promote growth better. The experiment was not very successful. Excessive magic hinders development, but the combination of magic and traditional methods gave the best result. This was the key to success. One day this village will be able to produce quality sugar. Sweet thoughts and images of desserts made the boy's face melt into a blissful smile, and saliva flowed calmly from his mouth. That evening, the entire farming family rejoiced at the money they had saved for the bear. These coins were barely enough to survive the harsh winter. After rejoicing over his profit, Lark asked his son if he had enjoyed the trip to the merchants. In response, he heard an enthusiastic yes and a story about the purchases. But for some reason, after this story, Owl's mother persistently began to ask if her son had bought anything besides seeds. A suspicious spark was already shining in her eyes. The boy, pale from the pressure, began to mumble something, but his father instantly betrayed him, solemnly informing his wife about the 4 knives that had appeared in their house. It seemed that Lark had not only the gift of silence, but also the ability to think. In the hanging silence, a voice came out, sweet-sounding but full of menace, calling out to Owl and Lark. The woman's smile shone with an angelic light, but the tone in which she asked what it all meant immediately made both men fall to their knees and beg for mercy. Owl decided to show the beans he had purchased to his childhood friend. Morel curiously examined the strange grains clasped in his palms. Staring at them in surprise, Morel asked, "Are these regular beans?" Smiling, Owl explained, "They are soybeans. Delicious in any form, long-lasting, and very nutritious. To make miso, you first need to soak the soybeans in water, then simmer until soft. Then mash them, mix with yeast and salt, and leave to infuse. When everything is ready, the mass is simply set aside until the evening." Mireille listened with rapture. Owl's knowledge amazed her. She watched the process with interest. To speed up the fermentation, the guy magically raised the temperature in the room to 60 degrees. Without that, everything could have dragged on for weeks. Mireille, interested in the process, began to bombard the guy with questions. This surprised him quite a bit. He hadn't expected such attention. Waving her hands, the girl emotionally described how the brilliance of magic burst from his palms. She had seen it all then on the field, and it had struck her. The guy was confused. It turns out that someone saw him then. Realizing this, he mentally scolded himself for his carelessness. But it's easy to get along with children. All she had to do was mention the flower field in the forest, and Mireille would instantly switch to a new adventure, forgetting about the glitter. so the young magician had to lead his girlfriend to the flower field. He felt guilty, but it was difficult to explain. He simply muttered an apology under his breath. That same evening, the two children opened a clay pot containing a thick brown mass, miso. This was the result of their first culinary experience. While stirring the seasoning, all admitted that the recipe still needed to be improved. But for the first time, it turned out pretty well. Margrave just wondered if it was safe to eat. Scooping some from this pot, the boy slowly stir-fried the miso with vegetables and offered it to the girl to taste. This was the decisive moment. At first she grimaced, afraid to try the unknown. But after taking the first bite, her face instantly brightened. Her eyes lit up with delight. It was incredibly delicious, even divine. This reaction made Owl laugh. He set aside half of the mixture for Margrave and explained. Miso can be diluted with water for soup, marinated in meat, or simply fried with fish. There are so many options. After seeing Margrave, the boy became lost in thought. The first condiment he created himself was miso. But if you collect new ingredients, you can make even more delicious dishes. If you already have soy and sugar soon, you can try making soy sauce. He wants to cook meat in teriyaki, but that's a long way off. To make teriyaki, you need sugar and mirin. And if the issue with sugar is already solved, then what to do with mirin is a mystery. Theoretically, mirin can be replaced with honey or alcohol. After all, it is essentially a sweet rice wine for cooking. So the easiest way to get honey is to use it. Honey may be in the forest, but it's better to postpone the search for ingredients. Night fell on the village, but the young farmer had already set goals for himself and was not going to stop. The morning came. It seemed normal. Everyone went downstairs, still half asleep, rubbing their eyes, greeting each other with a new day. They were greeted by their mother's surprisingly joyful voice. Her face was radiant with happiness, but there was a strange spark in her eyes. But the expression on her father's face was warily strange. The boy noticed that his mother had clearly slept well this morning. He jokingly said that it was all thanks to his beloved son, who had gone to bed early yesterday. Lately, Emreya had been insisting that her son go to bed earlier. Maybe he really did look too exhausted. It was noticeable to the child. In contrast, his mother looked even more beautiful than ever. Perhaps thanks to the new cosmetics? However, his father's exhausted face at the table dotted all the I's. But cosmetics had to be ruled out. There wasn't even a bathtub in this house. The word bathtub hung over Owl like a heavy burden, and he couldn't get it out of his head. After finishing his morning chores, he was struck by a new idea. Today he had to build a bathhouse. The plan was already forming in his head, and it was impossible to stop it. Why didn't this idea come sooner? Probably because there wasn't a single bathhouse in the village. But now that the idea had emerged, it remained to clearly plan the construction. It was decided. The base would be wood. The bathtub should be spacious and comfortable. The mere thought of hot water brought a satisfied expression to his face. Enlisting magic, Owl strengthened his body and began work. He cut down trees with wind, dug a hole with earth magic, built a foundation, built walls and a roof. Everything went perfectly. Finally, the bathtub was ready. It was spacious, but not too big. The boy also dug a channel for the water to drain and cast a spell to prevent the wood from rotting. He even built a dressing room with a chest, a rug, a few towels, and a laundry basket. Everything he could find. Admiring his work, the boy thought. Thanks to magic, he had done everything extremely quickly. Although, perhaps, this would cause him problems later. But not now. His fascination was interrupted by voices. Someone asked what kind of shack was in front of them. The boy shuddered in surprise. The votes belonged to Emreya and Lark. The older members of the family decided to see what their son had been up to since morning. The father was the first to speak. Did his son build all this himself? When he received an affirmative answer, he began to praise the boy's abilities, and the mother immediately wanted to see inside. Perhaps because the bath had just been completed, everything inside was shining. Lark guessed what kind of room it was, and all confirmed it. The Holy Father himself had told him about the bath. After seeing his parents out the door, the boy finally got around to taking the bath he had been dreaming of. He immersed his childish body in the warm water and dissolved in pleasure. From the thick steam rising above the water, he felt as if he had been reborn. No regrets, only happiness. Suddenly, someone's voice shattered this idyll. It was Lark and Emreya. They entered the bath with enthusiasm, marveling at the luxury and admitting that they had never thought they would see anything like it while working on the farm. Their appearance surprised the boy. He began to ask why they had undressed, and immediately guessed that they were going to join him. Weak attempts at protest were pointless. "We're one family," the adults declared and jumped into the bathtub. Half the water immediately splashed out. Relaxing in the warm water, Lark declared that the bath was simply incredible. The fatigue disappeared, and his body became light. Emreya agreed. It should be like this every day. She asked her son this question. Her voice sounded too gentle, and the glint in her eyes was suspicious. Al felt the tension tighten in his chest. Panic froze in his eyes. His mother's smile was too dangerous, and her words were a clear hint. She hadn't forgotten about the bear. To avoid a disaster, the boy hastily assured them, if their parents want, they can have bath days whenever they want. The answer was a sweet smile and a phrase from his mother. Father and I love you very much. These words made his cheeks burn. Returning home in the evening, the boy was exhausted. He had been in the bath for too long. His face was still red like a ripe tomato. He barely made it to bed, dreaming of sleep. But his parents, on the contrary, seemed to have received a new charge of energy. They exchanged tenderness and sweet words. Wishing her son good night, Emrea asked him to go to sleep quickly. He replied that he could barely hold on anymore. After the bath, he just wanted to sleep. The next morning, something was wrong again. The mother's face was glowing with happiness, and her skin looked even smoother. This couldn't be a coincidence. The boy began to suspect that something was going on behind his back. Perhaps something very pleasant. But his father's exhausted look gave rise to certain doubts. In the forest near the village, a boy with white hair was already sitting, intently watching the bustling insects. His gaze was burning with curiosity. There was no doubt they were definitely bees. A strange range of emotions blossomed on the boy's face, joy mixed with displeasure. Finally, he found them. And that was what caused a slight disappointment. Obviously, the search took a long time. But if there is a hive, then there is honey. Looking more closely, he noticed that the bees were slightly larger than normal. But did that matter? His mind was already filled with thoughts of sweet honey. Ayul created a square barrier, cutting off the bees from the world, and immediately launched a fireball into it, presumably to destroy the potential threat. The flames were confined within the barrier. All that was left to do was wait. Eventually, the fire and smoke gave their results. The bees began to fall, motionless. The smoke caused oxygen starvation. They all died instantly. As he got closer, Al realized that these insects were gigantic. Perhaps they were not ordinary bees, but monsters. He had to be careful. A strange sound was heard behind him. The boy turned around. A huge hornet hovered right in front of his face. One bee survived. It was much larger than the others. Could it be the queen? The boy watched her movements anxiously, but relaxed his vigilance. She held on in the air for a while longer, but her strength was leaving her. Finally, she gently landed on the ground, making the boy's heart clench. Yes, he did all this for the honey, but now he felt like a real monster. Suddenly, he heard a faint plea for help in his head. His eyes widened involuntarily. Looking at the weakened queen with a touch of pity, he asked if she had anything to say. His conscience had long whispered to him that the strong should be defeated, not the weak. Listening to his inner voice, Al used healing magic. At first, the bee flapped its wings uncertainly, then rose rapidly and made a circle around him. Smiling at her, the boy was sincerely glad that she had recovered. After all, he was the one to blame for her suffering. Suddenly, a bee landed gently on his shoulder. It seemed that it had decided to travel just like that. Looking at her, the guy cautiously asked what it meant and if she wanted to go with him. In response, she nodded actively, approvingly. Touching his chin, he thought, if Mom saw the bee, she would get angry again, but maybe if I suggested something? Looking her in the eye, the boy said, if she brought honey from time to time, she could go with him. The bee nodded even more vigorously. The boy thanked his new companion and said that she was now his familiar, and he was glad to meet her. A trust suddenly arose between them. Owl looked at the bee. What name should he give it? A queen is a queen. Without thinking twice, he proclaimed, from now on, you are queen. In response, she fluttered her wings, joyfully and solemnly. After standing at the meeting place for a while, the boy decided to continue hunting. Before him stood a boar. He had never seen one so huge. Strange crystals grew all over its body, and its skin was covered with scars and cuts. It was definitely a monster, but there were no such things in their forest. Maybe it came down from the mountains in search of food? But that doesn't matter anymore. We need to think about how to hunt it. He was distracted from his thoughts by Queen, who flapped her wings vigorously, as if asking what he was doing. Owl replied, I'm thinking about how to catch a boar. In response, Quinn assumed a fighting stance. When asked if she wanted to help, she charged forward with lightning speed, completely ignoring the boy. With her insane speed, she entangled the boar and with a sharp, clear blow, made it let out a muffled cry of pain. With each movement, Queen became faster. Her blows became more precise, and undoubtedly more painful for the monster. After a series of powerful blows, the boar finally fell to the ground, and the bee hovered above it, flapping its wings in a victorious pose. She couldn't speak, but her look said, See what I can do? Joyfully running up to his companion, Owl began praising her, thanking her, and showering her with compliments. After all, what she had done was a true miracle. The smile on his face grew more and more sincere. Quinn accepted the praise with satisfaction. But now it was time to somehow get this boar home. When, exhausted, he finally reached the yard and placed his loot in front of the door, his father just threw up his hands. His son had once again exceeded all expectations. Once upon a time, such dangerous monsters lived in the thickets and terrorized the villagers, which made it necessary to hire adventurers. Lark said that this one must have come down from the mountains, and thanked fate for his son's safe return. Emreya had already opened her mouth to scold the boy, but suddenly she turned pale. Her gaze was fixed on something behind her. Behind the boy, a giant bee hung in the air. It looked like a daughter-in-law who had been brought in without warning. The embarrassed boy hurriedly explained. It was his familiar, and she was safe. Moreover, it was she who defeated the monster. Without giving his mother time to refuse, he added that Quinn had promised to bring honey for the whole family. And at that moment, Emreya's face lit up. Apparently, the love of sweets is a family trait. So, upon hearing the word honey, the mother instantly welcomed the new resident into the house. The boy just breathed a sigh of relief. Although the situation looked funny, all was glad that everything ended well. Quinn seemed to be happy with her new home too. But now another question arose, where she would live. Having gathered the materials, all, together with Margrave, set off into the familiar forest to build a new hive. Having measured the distances and carefully laid out the honeycombs, the boy worked intently while two pairs of curious eyes burned nearby. A girlish question was heard. What is he building again? The boy answered. It is a house for bees, which will produce a thick sweet substance, honey. Margrave dipped her finger into the jar, tasted it, and burst into a smile. The sweetness spread across her tongue like pure happiness. Queen, as the queen, even conquered other types of bees, so there were many hives. Now they gave honey, and at the same time protected the village from monsters. Mixing varieties made the honey even tastier. Having set up the hives, the boy was pleased with his work. Imagining how many things could be made from this honey, he couldn't wait to try it for the first time. The idea came instantly. To make raw meat soaked in queen's honey. Friends enthusiastically supported him and work began to boil. There are many types of cured meat, but this time the choice fell on pancetta. When he said the word, his friends just blinked in surprise. No idea. Pancetta means pork belly in Italian. It is cured bacon that is first salted and then dried. The main thing is this preparation of the meat. It is boiled, cut into strips, marinated for a week, and left to mature for 2 to 3 months. But the most important thing is the marinade. Water, salt, honey, onion, and garlic. Mix everything, boil and cool. Thanks to Queen Honey, this mixture will become special. When Margrave learned that she would have to wait, she was upset. She wanted to taste it right away. Owl smiled guiltily and promised he would prepare enough for the winter. He placed the marinated brisket in a magical barrier with a cooling spell to dry it out. After that, the friends parted ways, wishing each other well. Sitting on the grass, the boy smiled happily. Now he will always have honey. And by the new year, pancetta will also appear. All thanks to Quinn. Life in the village was calm and carefree, but very soon it was time to harvest beets. The next stage of his grand plan. After harvesting the beets, he would have both honey and sugar. Sweets no longer seemed like an unattainable dream. The day when he would taste them was drawing near. Harvest time had finally arrived. All, full of enthusiasm, stood in the kitchen next to Queen, preparing to make sugar himself. First, the beets must be peeled, cut into cubes about a centimeter in size, and then dipped in water heated to 70 degrees. Next, wrap the pan in a thick cloth and leave for an hour. Then remove the pieces, return the liquid to the heat, and evaporate until only pure sweet juice remains. The juice had to be boiled for about an hour, constantly skimming the foam from the surface. When the liquid became thicker, like syrup, the boy reduced the heat and continued to cook with concentration. When the mass turned white, he turned off the flame and began to stir the viscous mixture until it began to harden. It now looked like real sugar. He spread the finished mass on a dry plate. That's all. A simple process, but a miracle with his own hands was born right here. The result, however, did not live up to all expectations. The taste was similar to sugar, but the sweetness was weak, and there were impurities inside. However, for a first attempt, it was a victory. Wondering if it was possible to purify sugar with magic, the boy began to visualize the process in his head. If he visualized it correctly, perhaps he could achieve purity. And then the image of a washing machine appeared in his mind. He had to use the magic of water, create a rotation, like a cleansing vortex. Raising his hand, he activated the spell. The water spiraled, picking up lumps of raw sugar and drawing them into a clear whirlpool. The whirlwind continued to spin, and it became visible to the eyes how all the unnecessary impurities disappeared. When the flow subsided, only 2 piles remained, a wet one and a dry one. Pure, snow-white sugar gleamed in the dry heap. Its color resembled the peak of a snow-capped mountain, and its taste was delicate, perfectly sweet. The beet harvest was bountiful, so the boy had plenty of work to do. The days passed unnoticed, in the continuous boiling of cauldrons and sweet aromas. Near his small house, in the square, a mountain of clay jars had already grown up, his own sugar pantry. Each pot contained sugar, and with each new batch it became purer and more fragrant. Now this supply would last until next year. He planned to plant new beets in the spring. There were still seeds left. With that amount of stock, he could harvest 2 or 3 more crops. And now, with both honey and sugar, he had everything he needed to create sweets. A smile of joy lit up his face. He was closer to his dream. Why not try it right now? He thought, and started cooking. He lit the oven and kneaded the dough. He decided to make something simple but tasty. Later, he ran to his parents with a basket of his own crafts. Without saying what it was, the boy only said that he wanted to please his mom and dad. Moved by his words, the parents hugged their son tightly. They saw that he was growing not only intelligent, but also kind. A true miracle. In their hands lay round pieces of dough. Curiously raising them to their lips, they both took a bite at the same time, and a pleasant crunch was heard. The surprise in their eyes turned to admiration. The taste was incredible, but the behavior of his mother, who began to call him "my sweet boy," slightly confused Owl. Her smile was radiant, but there was a fearful light in her eyes, too fanatical. When asked what it was, he simply replied, "Cookies." Emrea, unable to contain her joy, asked if that was all he had baked. The guy admitted that he wanted to sell some of it to Mr. Lebrant. In response, her cry rang out, "No way!" Her face became menacing, as if before a battle. Despite her own words, the woman continued to chew on the cookies, assuring him that she would personally take care of the leftovers. The guy just sighed sadly. His mother, still enjoying the taste, asked where he had learned the recipe. Owl, smiling awkwardly, lied, saying it was a blessing from the goddess. The basket emptied in a flash. The dream of a sale dissolved along with the crumbs on the table. All 50 cookies disappeared in his mother's stomach. The boy only now realized how dangerous it was to underestimate a woman's love for sweets. Finally, the merchants came to the village again. The boy decided to show Mr. Lebrant what he had made from sugar beets. It would definitely interest the merchant. The merchant held up a shiny crystal of sugar in his palm and squinted in surprise. He had never seen such a white color, and he immediately recognized the honey, a true masterpiece. Turning on his trading intuition, Lebrant asked how much merchandise the boy had. The boy answered without hesitation, 20 jugs of sugar and 10 barrels of honey. A sly smile spread across the merchant's face. He easily said that he would buy everything without exception. Owl had not expected such success. His sweet dream was beginning to bear fruit. Lebrant announced his price, 5 gold pieces for sugar and 4 for honey. He even added that he was willing to pay an additional 5 silver pieces for the quality of the sugar. Owl, stunned by such a sum, once again plunged into dreams of unprecedented wealth, converting the coins into the currency of his past life. But suddenly he came to his senses, looked the merchant straight in the eye, and seriously asked if this was a joke. Such a sharp question made the man feel confused. Lebrant only smiled sheepishly and spread his hands. He noted in his mind, "You can't fool Lark's son," and he raised the price even higher, for both sugar and honey. Satisfied with the result, the boy concluded that he should speak confidently to the merchant, but he still felt grateful. Lebrant was an honest man who was the first to believe in his work. Thanking him for the successful deal, Owl handed him a small basket, saying it was a heartfelt bonus, a sign of cooperation. The merchant looked inside with interest and asked what it was. The boy simply replied, "Cookies, made by himself, made from the same sugar." When Lebrant took a bite, there was a pleasant crunch. The sweet, mild taste stunned the merchant. He even asked in surprise if the boy had baked it all himself. Hearing the confirmation, he only thought about it. The merchant's reaction was too calm, and the boy was confused. He did not understand what this silent man was up to. But Lebrant just straightened up and calmly said he was ready to pay 1 gold for each basket of such delicacies, if, of course, they were still available. The boy froze. 1 gold for a cookie? Even considering the price of honey and sugar, such an offer seemed too generous to him. With an embarrassed smile, he admitted that there was only 1 basket left, and he heard an instant response. "I'm buying everything, wait a moment to count." But in order not to burden the merchant, the boy quickly announced the amount himself. He had already calculated the profit so many times that he knew by heart how much he should receive. Lebrant's smile seemed too strained, and the young salesman began to suspect that this man was up to something serious. After the calculation, the merchant handed him a heavy bag of gold and, not hiding his interest, asked directly if he wanted to work for him when he grew up. The guy was surprised and, slightly embarrassed, replied that he couldn't even dream of such a thing. He was just a simple farmer. The refusal came out polite but confident. Lebrant just shook his head as he watched the boy walk away. A simple farmer doesn't make 230 gold pieces in one deal, that's for sure. The merchant was sure. This guy would face both difficulties and great discoveries. Such people do not remain ordinary. One day something bad happened. Mireille fell ill. She lay with a fever, and all sat next to her, not leaving her bed. Despite her weakness, the girl apologized for causing trouble. The boy only replied gently that everything was fine, because her parents were in the field, and he couldn't leave his friend alone. Looking at her haggard face, he quietly advised her to drink more water and rest. The sun moved slowly across the sky, and silence enveloped the room. When Mireille fell asleep, he finally got up from his chair, looked around. No one was around. A moment of silence, and he raised his hand to her face. A soft light shone from the palm of her hand. A warm stream of magic enveloped the girl's body, restoring her breathing, relieving the heat. By morning, the fever would be gone, and Mireille would be smiling again, as always. Covering her with the blanket, he quietly wished her pain-free dreams. But the next day the disease spread. Children all over the village were lying with fever. The symptoms were the same. Apparently the reason was the lack of hygiene. Adults could still cleanse themselves with magic, but children couldn't. And then the boy decided, we need to make soap simple, affordable, without magic. The next morning he set to work. Today his goal was to create his own soap. Queen flew by, as always, never leaving his side. He thought about how to make it smell nice, floral. But what flowers grow in this world? His gaze fell on Quinn, and the answer was there. Yes, next to him was a being who knew nature better than anyone, and if anyone could show him the flowers, it was her. Following his companion, the boy found a wonderful tree covered with snow-white flowers. Holding his breath, he whispered, "Camellia." Without delay, the boy began to collect the seeds that had fallen to the ground. From them, you can plant a few camellia trees near the house. The bees will love it, and the yard will shine with new colors. Having filled an entire bag of seeds, Owl wiped the sweat from his forehead and smiled contentedly. He had really done a good job today. It takes about 3 kilograms of seeds to make 1 liter of camellia oil. If he wants to grow these trees, he needs to have plenty of supplies. The recipe for making camellia oil is simple. Dry the seeds in the sun, leaving them under the warm rays for a whole day. Then the seeds need to be steamed for 15 minutes to remove excess moisture. Then the husks must be removed using magic so as not to damage the grains. You will need a press to extract the oil. When you hit the wedge with a hammer, the seeds are compressed and the aromatic oil begins to flow out. All that remains is to strain it to remove any impurities. This results in pure, almost transparent camellia oil with a pleasant texture and an amazing scent. Warm, floral, slightly honey-like. Then, potassium hydroxide should be added to it, which can be obtained by mixing calcium hydroxide with potassium carbonate. To do this, the boy burned the collected weeds and dissolved the ashes in water. The sediment that settled to the bottom was potassium carbonate, a natural gift from the earth. He obtained calcium hydroxide by mixing water with quicklime, which he had once purchased from Rebirth. Combining all this with camellia oil, he created a base for soap. Even in this form, the aroma was amazing. All that remained was to pour the mixture into molds carved from wood. The guy made several versions of the soap in different shapes and decided to test it in his bath. It lathered wonderfully and smelled incredible. You can even trade with such a product. Emrea, who had joined in the bathing, asked curiously where the soap came from, since they hadn't bought any. The guy, without getting out of the warm water, replied that he had made it himself. The next day, everyone felt the effects of the new soap. Mother's face was radiant, her skin was soft, and the scent filled the whole house. They had found a real treasure. From that day on, the family seemed to blossom. A happy, smiling mother, a calm father, and Owl, who no longer understood what was happening, but was glad to see everyone like this. Finally, it was time to visit Mireille. After her illness, the first thing he asked was how she was feeling. Smiling, the girl replied that she was almost well, and added that without his care she would not have gotten better. Delighted, the boy said that he had brought her some gifts, some wild deer meat and a basket of cookies. The girl burst into a smile, but the gifts didn't end there. Owl handed her a flower-shaped soap, one he had made himself. Mireille inhaled the scent and whispered in delight how beautiful it was. Hearing that he had made it especially for her so that she would not get sick again, the girl blushed, lowered her eyes, and smiled faintly. In response, thanking him for his concern, Mireille softly kissed him on the cheek. Now not only was he blushing, but she was too. And so the peaceful days of simple life passed. The seasons changed one after another, and winter came to the earth again. After throwing wood into the fireplace, the boy complained about the cold. The frost crept in unnoticed, enveloping the village in snow and silence. But even in winter, the arrival of the merchants was the most noisy event. This time, All himself went to the square and greeted Lebron as an old friend. The merchant wished him good morning, and they began to talk about business. He apologized for asking him to produce only certain goods, since the nobility from the capital were accustomed to those. Then the man warned that more and more people are interested in the origin of these goods. For now, he is hiding the source, but if the ruling family becomes interested, it will not be possible to hide it. Apologizing once more, he disappeared and just smiled. Owl returned the same smile. A real respect had long since been born between them. People say that traders only think about themselves, but Lebrand looked exhausted today. It seemed that the situation was more complicated than he wanted to admit. To avoid creating new problems, the guy said he would temporarily stop selling. There wasn't much he could do in the winter anyway, but he would bring something better in the spring. Laughing, Lebrand replied that he still couldn't believe he was dealing with such a young genius. They shook hands, and for a moment the world became warmer again despite the winter cold. As evening fell, life in the house didn't slow down for a moment. The boy's head was a swarm of ideas that he wanted to implement by spring, but the first of them was soy sauce and miso paste. Compared to the modern world, it could only recreate a fraction of the familiar tastes, no more than 60%. But everything is decided by experience and perseverance. If you're going to cook a real meal, the main course should be chicken in teriyaki sauce and miso soup, and for that you need a bird. Dressing warmly, the boy set off to hunt for a snowbird. The snowbird is a creature half a meter long, with white wings that shine like pure snow. Its meat is tender and juicy, but it is extremely difficult to catch. Owl loved meat very much. The thought that even in winter he would be able to enjoy a warm meal and share it with Margrave brought a sincere smile to his face. Snow was falling in large flakes, covering the ground. The boy walked through the forest and was surprised. Not a single monster on the way. Maybe they sleep in the winter? But still, how beautiful it is around. Suddenly, a signal from a magical detection spell flashed. Someone was nearby. The boy pressed himself against a tree and cautiously peered out. Before him stood a wonderful bird, snow-white, elegant, with graceful wings. Its appearance aroused admiration and respect in the boy. The boy forgot the purpose of the hunt. Was it really a snowbird? It was much larger than in the legends. Its gaze was calm but penetrating, and then a voice sounded in the boy's head. "I've already noticed you, so there's no point in hiding." His heart stopped. Had the bird really just spoken? It couldn't be imagination. The bird was clearly communicating with him. Who was she? He couldn't find an answer, but he stood there, not daring to move. The boy took a step forward and, smiling, introduced himself. He was standing in the snow, wearing a warm jacket, and white snowflakes were gently falling from the sky. The bird tilted its head and conveyed the thought. "You are an interesting and polite boy. This is the first time I have met such a person." Owl understood. Before him was a creature with intelligence equal to a human. The bird spread its majestic wings, and a powerful magical pressure was felt in the air. The boy turned pale. The power emanating from it was colossal. He froze, feeling that one wrong move could cost him his life. But the bird said softly, "Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you." They stood in the middle of the snowy forest, like two beings from different worlds. The boy timidly suggested that her name was Snowy, but she calmly replied, "No, I am Luca." The boy's cheeks turned pink. He smiled awkwardly and suggested that perhaps he was facing a legendary creature. The bird just nodded. "Yes, I am one of those about whom legends are made." Beads of sweat were running down his face. He breathed a sigh of relief. It was a good thing he hadn't tried to attack. He said, embarrassed, that he had guessed it right away. The boy took a step aside and, smiling, said that he didn't want to disturb the bird, so he would move on. But the bird only closed its eyes. When Owl had already turned away, the voice rang out again. "Stop!" He froze, and the snow continued to fall quietly, covering everything around. The boy turned around, covered in cold sweat. The bird said, "You have a hidden strength that is not typical of your age. You must learn more about yourself." She spread her wings once more, radiating a soft glow, and added, "You've intrigued me. From now on, I'll be watching you." The boy exclaimed in bewilderment, demanding an explanation. The bird only shook her head. "Do you mind?" she asked with a faint smile. Confusion gripped him. Owl lowered his gaze and said that he had nothing to hide, so he could do as he saw fit. The bird replied, "I'll decide for myself." She flapped her wings again. "I should reduce my size so as not to attract people's attention, and you, boy, should give me a name." With an embarrassed smile, Owl suggested, "Haku." The bird thought for a moment, then laughed, and the snow around it seemed to glow. "A good name," she said. Her body began to glow, shrinking until she perched on his shoulder. "From now on, call me Haku," the bird said. The boy just nodded, a little confused. The boy suggested they return home. Haku cheerfully replied that she had long wanted to see how human children lived. She sat on his shoulder as they walked through the snowy forest. Owl warned, Just don't talk in front of the others. Haku agreed. She would be silent like a normal bird. When they returned home, the boy called out that he had arrived, but the large queen bee immediately flew up and cautiously approached the new guest. Haku, sweating, timidly turned away. The battle of glances was just beginning. The bee flew up to the boy and buzzed sternly, demanding an explanation as to who had come with him. All waved his hands, trying to calm Quinn down, saying that everything was not as it seemed. Meanwhile, Haku cautiously approached. She and the bee stood facing each other, their eyes locked, and there was tension in the air. The bee hovered a few centimeters from Haku, both silent. Owl stood between them, not understanding whether they were arguing or just communicating in their own way. Suddenly, Queen flew away sharply, and Haku closed her eyes and began to twirl her bangs, as if trying to hide her embarrassment. Her cheeks turned pink. Finally, Haku spoke up. They said they had talked to Queen and everything was sorted out. They could even become friends. Owl exhaled happily, and the fire crackled merrily in the fireplace. Then Haku, with a sly glance, whispered that Quinn seemed to be out of his mind. The boy blinked in confusion, and the bee flapped its wings angrily. Haku just squinted with a smile. Outside, the snow was still falling, but the days were getting clearer. Winter was slowly retreating, and soon the sunlight sparkled on the tree branches. In the village square, carts hung with fabrics and decorations grew up. People looked at the goods, tried on clothes, bargained and laughed. Owl and Margrave walked side by side, smiling. They stopped near Lebrant, greeted him, and heard in response a warm, "How much time has passed? You have grown up so much." They talked about spring, about trade, about the fact that the market was getting busier again. Margrave waved her arms happily, remembering the dishes that Ol was preparing. He just looked away, embarrassed. "I'm out of treats today," he said. But suddenly a bottle with a shiny lid filled with luminous liquid appeared from his bag. Margrave and Lebrant looked at the bottle with interest. "Is this real glass?" The merchant was surprised. "Rarity is such a beauty," he added, leaning closer. Owl unscrewed the cap and poured a few drops into his palm. "I tried to make a potion for healing, but something else came out," he admitted. Then he leaned over to Margrave and told her not to be afraid. He gently placed his hands with the liquid on her cheeks. The girl shivered from the cool touch. The liquid quickly absorbed into the skin, and before the astonished eyes of Margrave, her face shone with a soft light, as if it had become fresher and more tender. "This is a care lotion," the guy explained. "It moisturizes the skin, makes it soft and radiant." Lebrant, taking the bottle, enthusiastically said that it was a real miracle. Any lady would be delighted. Owl laughed a little nervously and asked if the merchant could guess how much such a lotion cost. Lebrant rubbed his chin thoughtfully, while Margrave listened attentively. They agreed on 100 bottles, and that was it for now. Lebrant agreed, smiling. "You already understand the asking price well, my friend." The boy waved goodbye. The coins jingled in his bag, 10 gold pieces for each bottle. He felt his dreams come a step closer again. Later, he and Margrave went to the forest. The girl cheerfully said that it was time to continue her studies. Owl replied that they would start with a simple task, picking potatoes. They stood in the middle of a field surrounded by dense forest. Margrave waved her staff, depicting combat movements, and Owl dug in the ground, whistling, peace and harmony. 2 months passed. The village suddenly became bustling. People were coming out of their houses and whispering. The aristocrats had come to visit them, and in large numbers. Lebrant stood in the square, wiping the sweat from his brow. Luxurious carriages stopped at the gate, and behind them the forest darkened and the peaks of the mountains shone. Owl felt himself grow cold inside. He guessed that the aristocrats were attracted by his lotion and perhaps other products. Lebrant simply couldn't keep the secret. The merchant spread his hands, smiled, and said that he had finally returned to the village with goods to sell. The people listened, but the tension in the air did not disappear. Some people started whispering. Lebrant was trying to divert attention from the main point. But what would happen next? Sweat was running down his temples. "The lady in the carriage is looking for the craftsman who made these goods," he said. "But finding that person will be difficult." All realized that the merchant was covering for him. He had to play the role of an ordinary boy. Smiling, he raised his hand. "Mom ordered me to buy soybeans as soon as Lebrant arrived." Lebrant supported the game, smiling awkwardly. "Yes, long time no see. Thanks for still buying my goods." The guy nodded in response, trying to look calm. And at that very moment, the carriage door opened. A young girl with an imperious look came out, holding her dress. She called out sharply to Lebrant, and he and all froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. A girl with a haughty bearing stepped out of the carriage. She cast a cold glance at Owl and said that she wanted to ask about the child herself. Lebrant turned pale and quickly replied that the boy was an ordinary peasant. All, holding his breath, realized that he was facing Lady Moore herself. A vision flashed through the boy's mind. A castle with high towers. He remembered that Lady Moore was the wife of the Earl, the owner of these lands. She was famous for her beauty, intelligence, and the power of magic, a true aristocrat. Looking at the numerous bottles of lotion, all thought that this was exactly what the lady had come for. She was clearly obsessed with beauty. Lady Moore leaned over to the boy and asked why he needed soybeans. Owl took the bag and replied with a smile that his mother was making seasoning from them. Behind him was a forest and freshly plowed fields. But as he said it, he felt a cold sweat run down his back. It seemed like he had said something wrong without thinking. Lebrant, pale with fear, hastened to add that these beans were actually used to make pasta. His voice trembled, his smile betraying nervousness. Lady Moore's face darkened. She glared at the merchant and told him not to interfere in her conversation with the boy. Lebrant, wiping away the sweat, muttered an apology. Owl stood nearby, clutching the sack to his chest, thinking he had never felt so tense before. He added quietly that the merchant had not lied. They did make pasta from beans in the village. Lady Moore stared at him, then touched her chin as if considering something. Owl suspected that she had used truth magic to make sure he wasn't lying. And indeed, the lady closed her eyes and said that she didn't know about this way of using soy. But it was interesting to her. She leaned closer, smiled, and thanked him for the explanation. A strange, tense silence hung between them, as if time had stopped. Then she turned sharply and headed for the carriage. Her entourage followed, leaving the village in heavy silence. Lebrant put his hand to his chest, exhaled, and tried to smile. Owl watched silently as the carriage moved away down the road through the dust. Lady Moore looked around again, appraising the boy with a careful gaze. Lebrant tried to look calm, but his hands were shaking. A suspicion flashed through her mind. This boy was no ordinary child. His gaze and calmness were not befitting a simple farmer. Owl noticed her gaze and lowered his eyes in embarrassment. Lady sensed an unnaturally large amount of magical energy circulating in his body. This was exactly what Lebrant was trying to hide. She mentally noted that he wouldn't be able to do it for long. Such potential could not be disguised. Too much power for a country boy. Owl laughed with relief as he walked away. This time he was lucky. Starting tomorrow, he would once again live the quiet life of a farmer. The next morning he was walking through the forest, breathing in the fresh air. Suddenly, he felt someone watching him. His gaze drifted towards the bushes. He couldn't see the face through the branches, but he knew in his heart that it was Lady Moore's spy. She wouldn't stop until she knew the truth. Owl thought of his friends, Queen and Haku, who were hiding nearby. He ordered them not to show themselves, lest they expose themselves to danger. Then he took a bucket of water, smiled, and went back to his usual activities. He wanted to live the day simply, without magic like an ordinary peasant. Another 2 weeks passed. One day, as he was chopping wood behind the house, wiping the sweat from his forehead, he thought that the surveillance had stopped. But had it really? Stopping his work, he went into the forest thicket. Focusing, he folded his hands and whispered a spell of detection. Magical lines flashed around him, like the threads of a spider's web. Closing his eyes, he felt the surveillance continuing. The 2 weeks of peace had been an illusion. Suddenly there were shouts behind him. Haku and Queen jumped out from behind the trees, shouting his name. Owl screamed in fright, turning around abruptly. "I asked you not to go out," he exclaimed. But Haku, with a serious look, replied, "This is not the time for this. The situation is out of control." The boy was confused, asking what had happened. Haku turned to the mountains and said firmly, "Use your spatial vision. Look at Azare, now." He raised his hands, chanting a spell. Before his inner vision, the mountains on the edge of Onan village appeared, a dangerous place where monsters from A to D rank, and in some places even dragons, were found. The village froze. Hundreds of dots lit up on the magic map before him. The entire horde was moving towards their village. His heart was pounding wildly. The threat was closer than ever. A terrifying picture unfolded before the boy's eyes. Hundreds of monsters with faces twisted in rage. They were moving across the ground and sky, armed as if for war. Owl understood. They were all heading straight for the village. His face turned pale. His heart pounded. "This is terrible," he whispered, looking at Haku. She only nodded. "You're right, but it's not just your village that's in danger." Queen was already circling above them, preparing for battle. Haku looked at Owl and said, "Queen and I will protect the surrounding lands, and you protect your home." The boy swallowed nervously, but nodded. He had no idea how he could resist such a horde. Haku sighed, looking into the darkness above the mountains. "You'll cope. If not, we'll simply be wiped off the face of the earth." The boy shuddered at these words. Clenching his fists, Owl suppressed his fear. Haku looked at him with pride. "That's it. You're different now. We have to act." Time was running out. They had to run to the village. He rushed out of the forest, shouting that he would do everything he could. Haku and Queen flew in the opposite direction, their silhouettes disappearing in the light of the lightning. "Then we won't say goodbye," Haku said in farewell. Running home, Ol thought that his friends would be able to save the other settlements, but he himself had to save at least one, his own. Rushing into the house, he threw open the door and screamed for his parents. His voice was breaking, panic tightening his throat. His parents ran out to meet him, terrified. The boy was gasping for breath, screaming that a horde of monsters was approaching from the sacred mountain. If they weren't stopped, the village would disappear. Beads of sweat appeared on the parents' faces. They looked at their son, and fear flashed in their eyes. He wasn't joking. Owl repeated once again that there was no time. People needed to be evacuated urgently. Father remained silent, becoming more serious with each word. Finally, he said that the situation was indeed critical. But before he could finish, his son interrupted him, shouting that he was going to restrain the enemy himself, and they had to get the villagers out. The boy apologized and ran off into the night without looking back. His mother's voice could be heard behind him, but he was already running, clenching his fists, thinking only of one thing: to make it. "Forgive me," he thought. "You are angry, but I cannot help it." Tears shone in his eyes, but his steps did not slow down. Having reached the hill overlooking the village, Owl stopped. The flames of the sunset cut through the sky. "While my parents are saving people, I have to stop this," he whispered, and raised his hands in the air. His body glowed with radiance. A powerful explosion thundered in the sky, and magical energy spread in all directions, forming a protective dome over the village. He turned sharply, peering into the distance. "Lady Moore's observer will definitely see this light," the boy thought. "Let him come, I don't care." His gaze fell on the mountains. From there, a dark wave surged. Dust rose high into the sky, the earth trembled. It was a horde. Monsters of all shapes and sizes flew at him, roaring, their mouths open, some holding weapons in their paws. The air was filled with roars and growls. He realized that there were even more of them than he had expected. They weren't just attacking. Something was driving them down the mountains. Fear turned to determination. "There is no choice," he cried, spreading his arms. "I must use magic." His voice was drowned out by the rumble of the ground. Owl stepped forward, raised his hand. A stream of wind swirled in the air, growing into a tornado that lifted snow and dust into the air. Both hands glowed. The stream turned into a cutting tornado which rushed forward with a howl. Gusts of wind cut the monster in half. Magic roared, and fragments of weapons and bodies fell to the ground. Blood mixed with dust. The wind grew more and more furious. The boy was breathing heavily, sweat pouring down his face. Before him lay the bodies of fallen monsters, some still writhing in agony. He squinted his eyes, took a breath, and said quietly, "The first wave is stopped." His shoulders shook with exhaustion, but he stood. Ahead, beyond the fog and dust, a new wave was approaching. The ground hummed again with the tramp of hundreds of paws. The boy's eyes darkened with fatigue, but he didn't back down. "If they don't stop, I just can't stand it," he thought, clenching his fists. He raised his hand and a light flashed in it. "No, now is not the time for complaining. This is not the end," Owl shouted, summoning his most powerful spell. Lightning flashed in the sky. A thunderclap roared. Streams of electricity cut through the air, striking the monsters that had rushed into the village. The earth trembled with the roar, and the night was torn apart by the brilliance of the storm. When the spell wore off, the ground was littered with the charred bodies of the monsters. Smoke rose from them, and the survivors looked back in horror at their fallen brethren. The village stood in the middle of a field, where only a small area of land remained clear of corpses. But in the distance, a new wave of monsters, even larger than the previous one, was already advancing. His face was glistening with sweat, his hands shaking. Gritting his teeth, he raised his hand again. Another thunderclap. The sky opened, lightning struck directly into the crowd, destroying another wave. Before him lay the field, a black wasteland littered with bodies. But in the distance the shadows moved again, armed, roaring, relentless. The boy's hair was disheveled, his breathing heavy. "I did pretty well," he whispered. But new armed monsters were already appearing from over the hill. Owl fell to the ground, breathing heavily. His hand clutched a lump of earth. "It's bad," he whispered. "I have almost no strength." But the next moment, a roar tore through the air so loud that the ground shook. The boy's face turned horrified. It was something different, unlike the rest. Lifting his head, he saw a giant dinosaur, like a living mountain. Its skin gleamed with dark armor, and smaller creatures twitched beneath its feet. Owl froze. "Imperial dinosaur," flashed through his mind. "They died out a long time ago." But this one stood before him, a creature capable of destroying an entire village with a single move. The monster opened its mouth. A roar echoed through the area. Then it leaned forward and lunged straight at the boy. Owl only had time to widen his eyes. He created a barrier, but it crumbled in an instant. The impact threw the boy sideways, his hat flying off his head. The air was knocked out of his chest. The monster's tail flapped again, and the boy flew away, covered in his own blood. His body fell into the dust. Pain shot through his entire body. A scream escaped his lips. Dust covered everything around him. Owl, groaning, stood up, wiped the blood from his face, and looked again at the approaching giant. Bad. Very bad, he thought. The magic was at its limit. Thunderclap was sucking everything out. His spells might not have any effect on such a creature. The dinosaur raised its clawed paw, preparing to strike. The ground shook. The boy froze, realizing he wouldn't have time to dodge. The blow flew with lightning speed. Too fast, was all had time to think, closing his eyes. But at that moment, Haku appeared before him. Her wings flashed, and a powerful gust deflected the monster's blow. The ground split, and even the dinosaur froze in amazement. A light flashed nearby as Queen charged into the fray, shooting brilliant beams straight into the monster's face. Owl looked up, unable to believe his eyes. Both stood before him, serious, focused. Their silhouettes shone in the air. Owl shouted their names, feeling hope return. You're just in time, he said, smiling through the pain. Haku nodded. Sorry we're late. We will hold off the rest, she said. And you, Owl, with this monster. Her voice was confident, even though the danger was deadly. They both flew up, and blows rained down from the sky. Haku sliced through the air, and Queen fired glittering projectiles, destroying the smaller monsters. Owl looked at them and clenched his fists. Yes, I expected nothing less from the legendary bird Lucht and the queen bee, he whispered. Then he looked up at the imperial dinosaur. Your rival is me, the boy exclaimed. The monster roared again, baring its sharp teeth. A mountain of muscle and scale rushed forward, kicking up rocks. The ground shook as it charged at the boy. Owl took a fighting stance, his eyes shining with determination. He's already got me once, but he can't do it again, he thought. As the monster approached, the boy jumped sharply to the side. He's not as fast as he looks, he noted, sliding on the ground. Concentrating, Owl closed his eyes. Water bubbles began to grow around him. His hair rose into the air. Water cannon, he exclaimed and stretched out his arms. A powerful jet of water hit the monster, tearing the air apart. The drops scattered like sparks, but the monster's scales remained intact. It turned around, roaring even louder. Owl flew into the air, dodging another tail strike. Water splashed around him. Dinosaur swung his massive tail, tearing the air. Owl hung in the sky, dodging the blows and keeping his balance, like a shadow in a storm. The dinosaur swung its massive tail, tearing through the air. Owl hovered in the sky, dodging blows and maintaining his balance like a shadow in a storm. The monster's tail flashed before him again. The boy closed his eyes, stretched his arms forward, and began to release water charges continuously, flying over the giant's head. He circled around this monster, showering it with a hail of water balloons. The dinosaur's tail thrashed, breaking the ground, but he couldn't reach the boy. Owl felt that the forces were still unequal. Despite the danger, a smile appeared on his face. I never thought fighting such a giant could be so exciting, he whispered. Water ran down the monster's skin. It roared, its eyes blinking furiously. The dinosaur looked up at the boy standing teasingly below and roared. Owl smiled even wider, even though he knew his water magic was weak against an S-rank creature. Rising higher, he concentrated the energy in his hands. Ice crystals swirled around him, turning into sparkling balls. Try this, he whispered, and released them at the monster. The dinosaur raised its head and roared, but the water covering its body suddenly froze. A moment later, the entire carcass was frozen solid. A roar and the giant collapsed to the ground, raising a cloud of dust. Owl smiled. I knew it. The cold will freeze any reptile. Even the imperial dinosaur is no exception. Frost covered the ground at his feet. Bringing his hands together in front of him again, the boy began to cast a new spell. Light flashed between his palms, a rotating magic circle appeared. If water doesn't help, we'll use lightning. His gaze became determined, sweat beaded on his forehead. This is the end of it, he said, and energy began to crackle around him. Owl shouted the name of the technique, ultra-electromagnetic discharge, and a directed stream of light pierced the dinosaur's body. Lightning streaked around the monster, causing it to roar in pain. The flash blinded everything around. When the glow died down, a hole gaped through the monster's head, from which smoke and sparks flew. The air was thick with ozone. The monster raised its head, blood pouring from its mouth, its roar turning into a wheezing sound. Its body trembled, wisps of smoke billowing from its wounds. Then he staggered and hit the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust that covered half the field. The rumble echoed throughout the valley. Owl approached the giant head. His face was covered in sweat. His hands were shaking. He stared at the hole in the beast's skull, not believing that he had done it himself. Then his strength left him. The boy fell to the ground, arms and legs spread out. Panting, he whispered, "I barely have enough magic. I'm almost exhausted." Familiar silhouettes appeared in the sky. Haku and Queen were descending toward him. "Good job, hero," Haku said. "We had no doubt." The guy blushed, waved away awkwardly. "Thank you. How about you?" he asked. Haku smiled. "Don't worry, we've done it. The monsters are scattered." He stood up, wiped his sweat, and shouted, "The battle is over!" Haku and Queen rose into the sky, and behind them a panorama of snow-capped mountains and dark forests opened up. Meanwhile, his parents stood on the road to the house. The fields around them were devastated but alive. The mother and father peered into the distance, hoping to see their son, and then he appeared on the path. Smiling, all waved his arms. Their faces lit up with joy. He was alive. They rushed to him. The mother hugged her son, unable to hold back her tears. The father smiled, squeezing the boy's shoulders. Happiness and relief were in the air. "I have something to tell you," his mother whispered through her tears. "But the most important thing is that you're alive." The boy bowed his head, apologizing for breaking his promise to stay home. The sky above the roof of the family home was darkening. His father approached him and told him that the threat was over. The wave of monsters had retreated. He explained that this phenomenon is called monster migration. The people took refuge in the headman's house and survived the attack. Now everything is calm. The father smiled and added that he had no idea how strong his son was. All returned the same smile, looking down. He nervously adjusted his hat and said sheepishly that it was just a blessing and that he had been practicing a lot. His mother and father exchanged surprised looks. Then they both laughed, genuinely, with relief. "Our son is a hero, but don't be so reckless," said the mother, touching his cheek. They added that it was better to hide one's strength from others to avoid unnecessary problems. The father winked and said that he would go talk to the headman. "I'll go with you," the boy said, but his father only waved his hand, smiling. "Rest. The headman will find me himself. We are all alive. And that is enough." Attacked again and again. "This water is not so useless," he whispered, clenching his fists. A few days passed. A horseman in shining armor arrived at the village. He held a scroll in his hands and read out an order loudly. All and his father must appear before Margrave Randolph. A detachment of soldiers stood with him. They lined up in front of the house, while Owl's family watched, bewildered, from the threshold. The boy's heart quickened its pace. The calm vanished as suddenly as it had come. Owl glanced at his father. "What did you say to the old man that day?" he asked in a whisper. His father just looked away, silently swallowing his words. Beads of sweat were running down his face. "I only ordered everyone to hide," he said, "because when we were in the forest, I saw a horde of monsters coming down from the mountains." The soldiers marched through the village, past the places where the bodies of the monsters still lay. The villagers watched them with their eyes. Owl remembered his magical explosion and realized that Lady Moore had definitely noticed its effect. They set off for the wagons. The boy thought that the explosion must have made too much noise. As he sat down in the carriage next to his father, he felt a foreboding coldness creep into his heart. Finally, they arrived at a huge building. High walls, many windows, everything shone with luxury. The father froze, as if enchanted. He had never dreamed of such palaces. Inside, they were led through long corridors. Along the walls stood girls in snow-white dresses, maids with impeccable manners. Owl and his father walked, trying not to make any noise. Finally, they were led into a room with a round table and carved chairs. They sat down, weary from their journey, like schoolchildren about to take an exam. Owl examined the decoration. "As befits a Margrave, everything looks more luxurious than our entire region," he thought. "We feel as if we have entered another world." Then he looked at his father. He was trembling, his hands clasped in his lap. He seemed even more worried than his son. The door opened, and a maid entered the room with a tray. She set down the cups, bowed. On her head were soft cat ears. Owl thanked him, and the girl was embarrassed and smiled. As she left, her tail flashed in the air. "Beastmen, this is the first time I've seen them with my own eyes," the boy thought, not taking his eyes off her ears. "They must be soft as silk," his father suddenly whispered. Owl blushed and slapped his forehead. "Dad, are you serious?" he thought. "We're in front of the nobility." A voice suddenly came from behind. "So this is the first time you've seen a beast man?" The boy flinched. The man in the black suit was standing right behind him. He laughed, watching their reactions. "What's that face? Are you scared?" he said ironically. Owl turned around warily, not trusting this stranger. The man bowed. "My name is Gaiman Laurel, the head butler of the estate." The father hurriedly introduced himself, bowing as well. Owl stared at him intently. To become the chief butler of such a lord, one must be an extraordinary person, he thought. That look, I've seen it somewhere before. The butler approached the door and said, "His Majesty will receive you now. Allow me to escort you." Owl and his father followed him in silence. They entered a study, paneled in wood and decorated with gold patterns. A large window looked out onto the gardens. "You will wait here," Guimont said as he left. Soon the door opened. A tall man with a beard and blonde hair entered the room. "Sorry for the delay," he said pleasantly. Margrave Randolph sat before them. "My name is Randolph von Aristel," he said. "The king himself bestowed this title upon me, and you, I believe, are Owl and Mr. Lark." He sat down opposite, leaning back in his chair. "I'd like to discuss a recent incident near your village," he added with a smile, but interest flashed in his eyes. Sweat was rolling down Lark's face. He tried to smile, but his hands were trembling treacherously. Owl remained silent, only staring straight at the Margrave. "You were the first to see the horde of monsters, weren't you?" Randolph asked, leaning forward. "Tell me more." The boy smiled, trying to look calm. The father spoke nervously. "As soon as I saw the monsters, I immediately warned the headmen." Sweat glistened on his forehead. His voice trembled. "But you are just farmers," the Margrave shrugged. "Why take a child to the forest?" Lark took a deep breath and replied, "We ran out of medicine. We were gathering herbs. Sometimes we even go hunting." Owl sighed in relief. They had practiced their answers on the way. Randolph thought, touching his chin, and closed his eyes. Silence hung in the air. "There is logic," he finally said. "But maybe you are hiding something?" His voice became sharper. "Maybe it was because of you that this migration started." Lark raised his hands, trying to calm the Margrave. "No, your grace, I swear. We have no use for anything." Owl sat nearby, silently staring at the table, and anxiety was already pulsing in his head. "They suspect something." A depressing silence fell in the office. Randolph sat, leaning on his hand, thinking that ordinary villagers could not attract the attention of monsters. He was confused by something else. This guy was too calm. There was something hidden in him. A battlefield strewn with ashes appeared in his mind. "No casualties," he said aloud. And the magician who surveyed the battlefield confirmed that lightning magic was at work there. Owl's father stared in surprise, and then, unable to bear it, he looked at his son. He sat motionless, listening to every word, but remained silent. Owl looked away and closed one eye. "Dad, don't look at me so openly," he thought, trying not to show his alarm. The Margrave leaned forward. "So there was a talented magician fighting there, and it seems someone doesn't want to tell me anything." There was an icy edge to his voice. Owl gritted his teeth, remaining silent. Randolph remembered Moore's words about the strange boy. Owl's cheeks flushed red. I was scared then. I don't remember much," he said, looking down at the floor. "Interesting," Randolph continued. "Everyone was hiding in the headman's house that day, but you weren't seen there." A suspicious fire flashed in his eyes. The Margrave's gaze became piercing. "You're lying, boy." Owl began to wring his fingers nervously. "I was really scared. I just hid away," he replied. Randolph interlaced his fingers, looking straight into the boy's face. "I was told you were seen in the woods during the attack." Sweat glistened on Owl's forehead. He avoided his gaze, his heart pounding like a trap. "You're not looking me in the eye," Randolph said. "What are you hiding?" His voice grew colder with each word. Owl shivered. He closed his eyes. His own heartbeat was ringing in his ears. Fighting monsters was easier than this, he thought. Beside him, his father turned pale, almost unconscious. The end flashed through the boy's mind, and at that very moment the door opened, and a female voice abruptly shouted, "Randolph!" Mrs. Moore entered the room. Her hair fell in waves over her shoulders, her dress gleaming in the light. She exuded confidence, power, and a hidden menace. Owl froze, eyes wide open. He could hardly believe that Lady Moore had appeared right here, at the moment when he had almost been exposed. Randolph frowned, turning to her. "Karina," he muttered. Owl watched her silently, his heart pounding in his chest. Moore glared at the Margrave. "We were just discussing important matters." Randolph tried to smile, but the smile disappeared when she said coldly, "Shut your mouth, Randolph." He immediately bowed his head. "Yes, Lady Moore," he said softly. Owl could not believe his eyes. The powerful Margrave had obeyed her without a word. She pointed a finger in his face. How dare you pressure a child? Randolph, sweating, began to make excuses, but Moore only frowned. Her finger touched his nose. I told you to check the facts, not rely on your guesses. All sat to the side, clasping his hands, not knowing where to look. A cold smile appeared on Moore's face. You deserve punishment, and I will carry it out myself. She stepped sharply on his chest with her heel. Randolph cried out, but strangely, his cry was like pleasure. All and his father froze in shock. Without stopping, Moore turned to them and said gently, Please forgive me. The Margrave sometimes does and then thinks, and continued to calmly press on his face. So let's forget this annoying misunderstanding, she said with a smile, standing with her foot on Randolph's head. Let's go and have some tea. Owl only blinked, not understanding what was happening. She came closer. You have magic, don't you? She asked quietly. Owl closed one eye and replied. A little, not much at all. Moore smiled mysteriously, touching her chin. She sipped her tea, and he, holding the biscuit, watched her. She knows, thought All. She knows that it was I who stopped the monsters. But she is silent. Why? He took a bite and winced when Moore said, A very tasty cookie. She continued, looking into her cup. Such sweets are a real treasure in the capital. They are snapped up instantly. All listened silently, not understanding what she was leading to. Then she leaned closer, smiled, and said, I'm having a hard time getting even a basket of these treats. If only someone would make them especially for my family. The boy's cheeks flushed. I understand, he thought. It was a veiled offer. She promised to keep quiet about his magic if he would bake these sweets for her. Owl threw his hands up and thought that Moore had completely figured him out. There was no point in hiding any longer. Smiling, he closed his eyes and jokingly said that even Mr. Lebrun complained that the cookies were not baked enough. His face flushed. They say these sweets are incredibly difficult to make, he smiled. He added in his mind, but I'm not going to bake them in bags. Moore smiled slyly. Perhaps there's a merchant who'll buy them in bulk from a real craftsman. Owl shrugged his shoulders in embarrassment. Moore continued with a smile. You'd better ask Mr. Lebrun about that merchant. The boy immediately understood the hint and sighed inwardly. Maybe I should get the recipe, he muttered. Moore moved closer, her smile growing suspicious. Interestingly, she said, Lebrun doesn't know who the cook is, and you seem to know. How? She narrowed her eyes. So, if you know, then he's hiding you on purpose. Owl turned pale, looked away, and felt his heart speed up again. He sees a smiling Moore holding his head in her hands. I've been caught. Now I'll have to play by her rules, he thinks. Even the formidable Randolph doesn't seem as scary as this woman. She leaned towards him. From today, she said quietly, I want to be your friend. You don't mind, do you? The guy, sweating with excitement, just nodded. Moore continued to hold his head, smiling gently. I hope our friendship will last a long time, she said. All just stared, not knowing how to react to this. He and his father were sitting on the sofa, with Moore opposite, calm and smiling. Owl sighed in relief. His father had finally come to his senses after all the upheaval. The guy thought that from now on their friendship would be inevitable. If he created something new, Moore would get it first. Their collaboration was just beginning. He glanced at her. Her smile remained the same, cold and mysterious. At the end of the conversation, she only said, Let's be friends, forever. As their carriage pulled away from the Moore house, Owl thought that maybe she wasn't so bad after all. Yes, she was stalking and blackmailing, but at the same time she was helpful and had even given him a few useful things. He and his father returned home. His mother stood at the gate with her arms crossed. Her gaze shone with stern determination. All thought that the story of the monster migration had finally ended, and had brought not only danger, but also benefit. However, the father turned pale. His mother already knew about his addiction to the maid with cat ears. A storm could be felt around her. I'm done for, thought the father, and All could barely contain a smile. Several years passed. Peace reigned over the village. A little girl with an apron sat in a cradle, and Owl leaned over her. How cute you are, Sia. He smiled broadly, looking at his little sister. Finally, our family is complete, he thought, feeling warmth in his chest. He reached out to take Sia in his arms. His mother, standing nearby, laughed. You're just crazy about her. Owl agreed. Yes, she's incredible. And thought that he would do everything to make sure she grew up happy. Clenching his fist, he whispered, "I will secure her future. For her parents, and for myself." Confidence and pride shone in his eyes. The parents stood nearby, smiling. Their son had become the support of the family, and now a brother. They didn't need anything, it was all thanks to him. Owl blushed from the praise. He began to laugh, calling his parents to dinner. The sun was already sinking below the horizon. The shadows were lengthening. "I haven't wasted these years," he thought. Images of countless recipes flashed before his eyes. Thanks to Moore, he had obtained ingredients that no one else had seen here, and created dozens of new, amazing dishes. He imagined a chimney with a thin column of smoke. His invention, the world's first smokehouse. It became a real sensation. Moore adored smoked cheese and paid generously for it. He saw Moore covering his face with a fan as he watched the tasting. Owl laughed because he was making a fortune doing it, and he also got a percentage of the sales. Lebrant's shops, selling his inventions, oils, condiments, sweets, had already opened on the streets of the capital. He smiled. "I think I'm doing great. His house now stood in the middle of a well-kept garden. The beds were green. The flowers were blooming. "Now I am not a poor farmer, but a man who really lives," he thought, enjoying the simplicity. A familiar figure appeared at the edge of the forest. Mira raised her hand and called his name. Her cheeks turned pink, and her smile glowed with warmth. He blushed too, happily responding. Mira closed her eyes and laughed. Owl noticed that she was getting more beautiful every year, and it made him feel embarrassed every time they talked. Sia was playing in the clearing, waving her little hands. Owl, standing next to Mira, was casting a spell, creating small sparks of light that laughed along with the girl. Mira came closer, smiling. "Maybe you can teach me something new today," she said. Owl closed his eyes, smiled, and nodded. Around them, amidst the light and laughter, a calm, magical atmosphere of new life blossomed. Owl stretched out his hand and began to cast a spell. Mira stood nearby, watching intently. He thought that the girl had been increasingly interested in magic lately, and he decided to teach her water spells. After all, Mira has a real talent for it. A gentle glow flashed in the air. They returned home, continuing their experiments in the kitchen. Owl smiled, thinking that Mira's possession of magic would help protect herself. Besides, lately she had often cooked with him. Her dishes were becoming more and more delicious. Mira held the knife, then suddenly laughed, closing her eyes. Owl thought she was hinting at marriage again. Every time she brought up the subject, he blushed, even though he knew how close they were. Later, Owl, Mira, and little Sia set off into the forest again. The young man caused a small whirlwind, and the girls laughed merrily. He thought that lately they had been spending more and more time together, and their bond had become truly warm. Until everything changed. The forest was silent. When the training was over, Mira thanked him for his teachings and handed him a letter. The seal bore the coat of arms of the Margrave's wife. Owl raised his eyebrows in surprise. Why had Lady Moore written to him personally? He unfolded the letter, and Mira leaned close, trying to peer inside. Their faces froze. It was from that moment that a new, difficult chapter in the boy's life began. Dark pines towered above them, and the wind seemed to whisper of change. The events are transferred to the capital of the Kingdom of Liad. On the top of the mountain stood a majestic castle, surrounded by high walls, and below it spread out a city, cut through by a wide river, sparkling in the morning light. Amidst palace gardens with stone statues stood the home of a noble family. In a room with marble walls, a cup of drink and a basket of cookies stood on the table. Someone was savoring it with noticeable pleasure. A girl with her hair tied in 2 ponytails was holding a cookie and examining it. "Just a regular sweet, nothing special," she said, slightly condescendingly. But as soon as she took a bite, her eyes widened. Her expression changed from indifference to complete delight. She finished the cookie to the last crumb. "It's incredible. The taste, the texture, the aroma, everything is perfect," she exclaimed. "It's not like a regular treat at all." The girl's cheeks turned slightly red. She turned to the man at the door and said authoritatively, "I want to meet the person who makes these amazing sweets." The man, named Albus, bowed, placing his hand on his chest. "As you wish, madam," he said with a smile. "I will do my best to find this man." The girl in the dark striped dress continued to munch on the cookies, her cheeks covered in crumbs. "It's strange," she muttered. "Why does it end so quickly? And why is everyone so excited about it?" The events were transferred to Lebrant's trading house in the capital. A small brick building stood on the square, near which a crowd of shoppers was bustling, and the counters were bursting with goods. Inside, at a wooden table, Lebrant sat with a letter in his hands. His gaze was intense. Every word in the letter seemed heavy. Sweat broke out on his forehead. "Just as the business got back on its feet, here come the dukes and even the royal family. Because of that guy. he thought, wiping his forehead. Meanwhile, Albus stood at the counter smiling at the salesman. Lebrant recalled with concern how this head butler of the Adams household had questioned the merchants about the origin of new goods. A carriage was rolling somewhere in the mountains. Lebrant sat inside, thinking he had to talk to Lady Moore, but even she couldn't possibly hide all from such high families. He found himself at her estate. "All the noble families have begun to take an interest in the boy," he said anxiously. Moore raised a hand to her face, closed her eyes. Her thoughts were heavy. She sat down opposite him, her legs crossed. "This is serious," she said calmly. "To protect him, we have to limit his communication. It's the only way." Lebrant asked grimly if there was another way. A crystal chandelier shone above them. They discussed the plan at length. "He must not know anything yet," said Moore. "I will explain it to him later." Several weeks passed. Events returned to Lebrant's trading house. Albus stood among the stalls, watching the shoppers. The shop assistant was handing a small package to the child, while a woman nearby was choosing fabric. He narrowed his eyes. There were significantly fewer visitors. The shelves were emptying. Products that had been a hit yesterday were disappearing. There was something unkind in the air. Everything is selling too fast. Is this really the work of one man? Albus thought. The rumors about a peasant named Bacon seemed like nonsense, but now he hesitated. That evening he was sitting in a tavern opposite a man in a suit. 10 peasants buy bacon cheaper than in the capital, he muttered, ordering an ale. The hall was bustling. Dozens of tables were occupied. The bartender remembered that once a boy from that village had treated them to some amazing meat, the taste of which they could not forget. Albus squinted. "Perhaps you remember the name of that village?" he asked. The bartender scratched his chin, then said, "I can't remember the name, but there's something strange going on there. The locals aren't ordinary people." Bottles gleamed behind him, reflecting the light of the torches. Albus frowned, imagining the horde of monsters he had heard about from others. The barman added in a whisper, "They say they stopped that invasion in half a day. No casualties. People believed God himself was on their side." Albus narrowed his eyes, remembering the stories of the strange village. The castle, on the top of the hill, was silent. He sat among the shelves piled high with books, reflecting that he had previously thought it was just gossip, because everyone was talking about the miracle at Onan. He unfolded an old map covered in notes. "Onan," he repeated aloud. So many versions, so many secrets, and it all looked too suspicious to be a coincidence. After a while, he found himself in a merchant's guild. Behind the counter stood a burly man who assured him that he had never heard of such a village. On the shelves were bills, sacks, barrels, but no mention of Onan. Light clouds floated over the guild building with the Libra crest. Albus thought someone was deliberately covering up their tracks. He then went to the Adventurers Guild, but there too they were silent, as if the village had simply been wiped off the map. In the tavern, a man with a scar on his face was sipping ale and smiling, saying, "No, there are no hunters there. But the cuisine is fabulous, cheap, delicious, and the festival there soon will be the best in the entire district." Albus poured him another mug. "So I've found a clue after all," he thought. The man thanked him, and in the corner someone in a hood was watching them carefully from the shadows. Work was in full swing in the wide field near the forest. People were setting up tents. Carts with goods were arriving from all directions. The harvest festival was beginning. Owl and Mira stood at the counter, examining the goods. "This year's festival will be fun," he smiled. Mira replied that every year even neighboring villages join in, because it is the main event of the fall. She laughed, admitting that she had been helping him with the nest for 3 years. Owl closed his eyes, smiling gratefully. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said. Cows were grazing in the field. The boy thought that this year the celebration would last 2 days, and the winner of the competition would receive 2 cows, 50 gold pieces each. It is not surprising that everyone worked with double enthusiasm. Shops were being built one after another. This year there were twice as many participants as before. The village was buzzing like a beehive, and all wondered how the festive spirit could change people so much. A gray-haired man with deep wrinkles approached him. "How are you, young man?" he asked. Owl recognized the elder Maruga and greeted him happily. Blushing slightly, Owl cautiously asked why the celebration was so big this year. The headman laughed. "It's thanks to you, boy. Your inventions have changed the village." Maruga pointed at the merchants and the decorated streets. "Before, young people would run away from here, but now it's the other way around. Thanks to you, the Margrave allocated funds, and the village flourished. That's why I decided to hold a competition this year. Everyone is sure that your shop will win," he said. Owl just shook his head. He was embarrassed by such praise. The holiday was buzzing around, music, laughter, voices. I didn't do it for fame, the boy thought. But if everyone is happy, so be it. Suddenly, a man with the scar approached the elder, the same one from the tavern. He raised his hand in greeting, and Maruga exclaimed, "Oh, Mr. Glenn, as always, impeccable." Behind him was a cart with some kind of animal. The headman bowed slightly. "I see. This is the first time I have seen such a guard. I am Maruga, the headman of Onan." Albus placed his hand on his stomach and bowed in return. "It is a great honor to be a guest in your village. I am Albus, butler to the Duke of Adams, or RSM." Meanwhile, at the Margrave's estate, Moore exploded with anger. "What? The Duke's butler has arrived at Onan? I will not let them take the boy." She ordered the carriage to be prepared, her eyes burning with determination. She gritted her teeth, clutching the fan in her hand. "This boy belongs to me. I will not give him to anyone," she whispered, and even her servants shuddered at the tone. The next morning, birds were flying over the mountains. A carriage bearing the Filian coat of arms was racing along the road. 2 horses were carrying it through the fog, along fields and thick trees. Inside sat a blond man with long hair. "So the creator of those legendary delicacies lives in the wilderness?" he said with a sneer. The black-haired companion replied, "Yes, sir, there can be no mistake." The carriage rolled up to a 2-story house. "Quite fitting for such a village," the blonde chuckled. "He will bow down to me before evening. He will become my cook, whether he wants it or not." A man in a formal suit entered the door. "Excuse me for the unexpected visit," he said, placing a hand on his chest. "I am Cyrus, butler of the Earl of Filane. Could the master of this house spare me a few minutes?" But Albus was already standing in the corridor. He laughed softly. "I didn't expect to see the Count's butler here. Too many distinguished guests for a village like this, isn't it?" Cyrus narrowed his eyes. "I am a servant of the Filane family. You seem to be from the Duchy of Adams." Albus smiled. "Exactly." They exchanged strained pleasantries, carefully assessing each other. Cyrus smiled coldly. "I am only following my master's orders, but it seems our goals coincide." Albus tilted his head slightly. "It is quite possible." There was a hidden tension in the air. "It's a pity the headmistress isn't here," said Cyrus. "We'll have to go." But a man with a scar appeared in the doorway. "What are the Earl's family doing here?" he asked. Albus, without changing his tone, replied, "They probably came for cookies." The 2 butlers looked at each other. A dark cloud was gathering over the house. Albus closed his eyes and thought. So the rumors about the Count's son are true. Greedy for money, domineering to the point of madness. But why does he need a peasant and his sweets? Albus opened his eyes and looked away seriously. The Earl's son will do anything to rise above everyone, he thought. I wonder what his next move will be. The smile on his lips was cold. He was waiting to see for himself. The village square of Onan was filled with excitement as the village headman solemnly declared the harvest festival to begin. People raised their hands in joy, shouting, and colorful flags fluttered from the tops of their tents. The streets were lined with stalls, with merchants beckoning visitors with their barrels, baskets, ornaments, and fragrant food. People crowded between the rows, filling the air with noise and laughter. Owl and Mira stood behind the counter of their restaurant. In front of them was a line of customers that couldn't fit in the crowd. Mira looked confusedly at the sea of people, and Owl, blushing, nervously adjusted his apron. They looked at each other, and, smiling, told each other that this year there were more customers than ever. "We have to cope," Mira exclaimed. And they, working in pairs, took orders, handed out sweets, and joked with people. As the day wore on, the crowd began to disperse. Owl wiped his sweaty forehead, sighed, and said it was time to rest. Mira agreed, and they sat down by the tent, enjoying a brief moment of peace. But suddenly the crowd parted. A loud young man in expensive clothes pushed forward, roughly pushing people away. "Where are the cookies? I want them now!" he screamed, and the faces of the crowd filled with surprise. Mira and all looked at the impudent man in surprise. "Do you know who this is?" she asked. "A typical narcissistic aristocrat," the boy answered through gritted teeth. The Count's son waved his arms, frightening people with his demands. "I'll deal with him myself," Mira said, smiling coyly. She approached the man, holding a tray of cookies. "Sir, perhaps you wanted to taste our sweets." Her voice was calm and polite. The man's eyes flashed with a mad brilliance. He looked at Mira as if he had forgotten everything around him. "What a beauty! You will become my wife," he exclaimed, and the girl froze in amazement. He spread his arms, proudly declaring that she would become the wife of the heir to the earldom of Filane. Mira calmly held out her hand, refusing with a smile. The angry man shouted, "Name the reason for the refusal." But Mira silently took the cookie and began to shove it straight into his mouth. Here's the reason. We don't work with such boors. Eat it up and go. Owl stood aside, next to a few residents who were laughing quietly. Mira, as usual, doesn't mince words, he whispered, barely holding back his laughter. The man's face turned red, his fists clenched. You'll regret it, he shouted, running through the crowd. People laughed and applauded, watching the great gentleman flee without dignity. He didn't even pay, Mira said in surprise. Owl laughed. And thank God. Let him take his shame without change. They returned to work, and the festival came to life again to the sounds of music. Meanwhile, a carriage with 2 passengers had left the village. Inside sat the Count's son, sullen and silent. His companion, Cetarest, said a silent prayer before speaking of the plan. Find out everything about her, the Count's son ordered. Find out who her lover is and bring him to me. Cetarest's eyes flashed with coldness. He accepted the order without a word of doubt. I'll deal with this bastard myself, said the Count's son, clenching his fist. His smile was full of malice. Then she will remain mine alone. The carriage stopped in front of a 2-story house. The Count's son laughed loudly and smugly, while someone from behind a tree listened intently to every word of his conversation with the servant. Meanwhile, Albus approached Owl's tent. Excuse me, but are you the one who bakes these famous cookies? He asked with a friendly smile. Mira looked at him in surprise, and behind the man there was already a new line of customers. Mira blushed. Another aristocrat? But at least this one is well-mannered, she whispered. Albus looked noble, calm, and it only embarrassed Aulus, who was standing next to him in a simple cap. Owl approached. Excuse me, I am the creator of these delicacies. Albus tilted his head slightly. I apologize for the surprise. Your cookies are a true masterpiece. Owl nodded gratefully. Perhaps I can help you with something, asked Owl. Albus closed his eyes and smiled warmly. I just wanted to meet the author of such taste. The boy looked at him carefully. This man looks sincere, but there's something dangerous in his eyes, he thought. So you're just here for the cookies? Owl asked. Albus leaned closer, and there was tension in the air. I rarely see a young man who understands everything at a glance, he replied. Come with me to the capital, Albus added. Your talent should not be wasted in the countryside. Owl replied with a smile. A young man should not trust strangers. Albus placed a hand on his chest. My name is Albus. I am the butler of the Duke of Adams, and I mean no harm. The people around them watched them as they selected their goods, unaware of the important conversation they were overhearing. Owl leaned forward a little. You can call me All, and why does your mistress need me? Albus answered calmly. She wants to meet the creator of the kingdom's most popular biscuit in person. The boy smiled uncertainly. I'm glad, but I'm not sure it's a good idea. Albus leaned closer. You'll be paid. Let's say 10 gold pieces for the visit. How do you like that offer? Owl swallowed, imagining the sum, nearly 1,000,000 yen. His face was burning, but he only muttered, very tempting. I'll think about it. Albus laughed softly. That's exactly what I expected. Albus put his hand on his chest and leaned slightly towards All. I'll be living in the headman's house for a while, he said calmly. If you change your mind, you can find me there, but I must go now. Owl listened intently, his eyes fixed on the wall. Albus slowly walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Owl watched him go, wondering if this butler really wanted to take him to the capital. But why? Something about this story was too strange. Night had fallen. A large moon slowly emerged from behind the clouds, illuminating the fair. People were still walking between the rows, where torches at each stall threw a flickering light on the colorful stalls. Cyrus closed his eyes calmly. Yes, my lord. This guy is the creator of cookies, soap, bacon, pita bread. Everything the Lebrant house sells is made by him. The butler's voice was even, but there was a sense of menace in the air. And also, there's a girl, Mira. She helps him. She knows all the recipes. They're obviously very close, Cyrus added. Their smiling faces flashed through the man's memory. The Count's son was furious. Then I will take the girl for myself and get rid of the boy, he shouted. Cyrus lowered his head. As you command, my lord. No witnesses. Tonight, the Earl's son added, his voice cold as a blade. Cyrus bowed silently, accepting the order. The air around him became heavy, eerie. A tall man in black appeared next to the carriage. His face was hidden under a hood and scarf. He walked like a shadow, carrying something in his hand, a long blade. The Count's son laughed nervously. Today luck is on my side. I will get both knowledge and the girl. His laughter rang out in the darkness like the cry of a madman. When he was left alone in the carriage, a light knock was heard. Good evening, sir. Allow me to talk about village affairs, came a voice from outside. The Count's son, irritated, decided to get out. He stepped onto the cold ground, clenching his fists. Show yourself, he growled. Silence. Only the wind stirred the open carriage door. A black silhouette emerged from the darkness behind him. The unknown man raised his hand. A blade flashed. The Count's son didn't have time to look back. He only frowned, sensing movement behind him. There was a thud, and blood spattered the air. The carriage remained open, illuminated by the moonlight, which made the scene eerily calm. Within a few minutes, the village was plunged into silence. People were going home. Near one of the houses, next to the vegetable garden, stood a lone black figure, motionless as a shadow. Inside, Owl slept peacefully, even smiling a little. Saliva dripped from the corner of his mouth. But suddenly his sleep was interrupted by a light rustling, too distinct to be wind. The boy woke up abruptly. His heart was beating fast. The house is protected, his thoughts flashed through his mind. I cast a detection spell. And then he felt someone standing by the wall. Using his spatial vision, Owl saw that the stranger was holding a weapon. Not a drunken tramp, he thought, clenching his fists. He didn't come just like that. He dissolved into thin air, using invisibility magic. You attack first, you survive, flashed through his mind. His body disappeared into the shadows. The killer looked around. The victim had disappeared. How? He whispered. He was here a second ago. I don't feel his spell. Fear was evident in his voice, and at that very moment, Owl appeared behind him. Who are you, and what have you forgotten near my house in the middle of the night? He said coldly and clearly. The stranger flinched, stepped back sharply, and threw the blade at the boy. The metal gleamed in the moonlight. Owl parried the blow with streams of power, spread his arms and concentrated his magic, amplifying it to the limit. Then he sharply counterattacked, unleashing a wave of energy. The assassin managed to put up his shield, but the blow was so strong that his legs buckled. The ground trembled beneath him. The guy squinted, carefully studying his opponent. The magician, and not weak. He dodges well, quickly puts up defenses. I wonder how long he'll last. Owl raised his hands to the sky. Small whirlwinds began to swirl around him, resembling tiny tornadoes. The air roared. Dust rose under his feet. Finishing the spell, he directed the whirlwinds directly at the enemy. Disperse! The boy shouted, and the ground exploded with light. A wave of dust covered them both. When the noise died down, All, panting, looked ahead. Did you hit it? He whispered. But when the dust settled, all he saw was the cloak slowly falling to the ground. The boy approached, picked up the black cloak, and examined it closely. There were traces of blood on the hem, proof that the attacker had been wounded but survived. He escaped, but it cost him dearly, thought Owl, clutching the cloth. He's alive, but he won't get up for a long time. And if he does return, I'll be waiting. The moon illuminated his face, and a flame of determination lit up in his eyes. Owl scratched the back of his head, sighed, and turned toward the house. Enough adventures for today, he thought, yawning. It's finally time to get some sleep. He lay down, not even realizing that the night was just beginning to reveal its consequences. The morning seemed alarming. A woman's scream came from the street. Owl jumped up and ran to the sound. Mira, panting, pointed with her hand. There, a person, all covered in blood. They ran to the man, who lay on the ground, pale and unconscious. The wound on his head was throbbing, blood oozing from it. Mira covered her mouth with her hands, and Owl leaned over, checking for breathing. This is the aristocrat who came yesterday with his friend, the boy whispered. I thought he just got drunk and fell asleep, Mira replied. But then I saw the blood. A crowd had already gathered around. People were whispering, creating a buzz. All straightened up and called out, Calm down, don't panic! First we need to figure out who he is and what happened. Suddenly, a woman in a luxurious dress pushed her way through the crowd. I am the Count's wife, she said imperiously. Let me take control of the investigation. Disperse, people. The lady turned to Albus, who had just arrived. Mr. Butler, help me sort this out, she asked. Albus bowed. Of course. If the Count's son is hurt, it's my responsibility. A man with white hair stood by the body. He surveyed the scene and said, Strange. I don't see the Filane family's butler. Where is he? His words brought a look of alarm to All's face. The boy froze, and the events of the night flashed through his memory. It can't be. The one who attacked me was him. The butler Filane, he thought, feeling a chill run down his spine. But his thoughts were interrupted by the Countess's gaze, direct, piercing. She came closer, leaning in. Young man, come here. There's something to talk about. She put her hands on her hips, leaned towards him. You know something, don't you? Owl pretended not to understand, but under her insistent gaze he finally whispered. Okay, I'll tell you everything I saw. Looking around to make sure no one was listening, he briefly described the night attack. The Countess listened attentively, then added, They say that the butler, Filane, used to be a spy for the crown. If that is true, his appearance here is no coincidence. She leaned even closer, her hair brushing All's shoulder. Don't worry, I won't reveal how you fought him off. But help us find the culprit, and we'll both win. The boy nodded. Agreed. Meanwhile, Albus bent over the wounded man. There are no magical marks. It looks like the blow was inflicted with a blunt object, he said, carefully touching the wound. There is no danger to life. We need to take him home. Everyone leaned closer. They noticed a white powder on the wounded man's head. What is this? Owl asked in surprise. The woman with the hat replied, Like the remains of alabaster, or a potion that is sprinkled on weapons. Albus straightened up. We need to talk to the residents. Maybe someone saw something. The Countess agreed. Yes, let's go. If the attacker is still around, we'll find him. They walked through the streets of the village, asking people about the strange events of the previous night. People looked around, reluctant to answer. Fear hung in the air. The first man just waved his hand. I drank too much yesterday. I don't remember anything, honestly. However, later someone did remember. I saw a black-haired butler, asked everyone about the relationships between the locals, walked around the shops, looked for something. Albus smiled softly, addressing the woman selling vegetables. Have you ever seen anything with bloodstains? A stick? A hammer, perhaps? But she just shrugged. Further along their path, a dark-haired man happened to pass by, who repeated, I saw a figure in black. It was walking towards the river, Albus thought. Everyone remembers the butler Filane, and too many people have seen him. It looks suspicious, like he was deliberately showing himself to everyone. Meanwhile, the Countess asked the villagers how they felt about the wounded man. The answers were almost the same. No one liked the impudent stranger. Even the village headman complained about him. A young blonde in a headscarf said coldly, He acted like the whole world revolved around him. No wonder someone couldn't stand it. The next man said irritably, They couldn't stand him. There were so many complaints, one day in the village, and everyone was already tired of his arrogance. The old man added, shaking his head, A boy with money instead of brains. He asked for it himself. Maybe the lesson will be useful. Summing up what he had heard, Albus said, We have many opinions, but no proof. We need to talk to the headmaster. He's heard all the complaints. The three of them headed to the headman's house. He met them with a gloomy face. Yes, everyone complained. I thought he was just a haughty nobleman and would calm down on his own. The headman sighed heavily. This was the first holiday I decided to hold for 2 days in a row. I wanted to give people joy, and now I'm afraid only bad memories will remain. Albus and all were silent. The Countess tilted her head, peering at the headman. Why did you decide to extend the holiday this year? Her gaze was too attentive, as if she were searching for hidden guilt in his eyes. The dark-haired headman sighed heavily. You, madam, probably know our trouble. The youth is fleeing to the cities, but in recent years the population has grown, and I no longer expected to see the village alive again. Suddenly the headman bowed low to all. It's thanks to him, he said excitedly. It was this boy who revived the village. Such respectful attitude from a grown man made the young man blush. Owl waved his hands in embarrassment. Please stand up. There's no need to thank me. His voice trembled, but he said sincerely, I just love this village. Just like you, Mr. Headman. The Countess ran her hand over her face and sighed sadly. So, to sum it up, we still don't have a single suspect who could attack a person of high status. Albus closed his eyes, and the blond young man next to him noticed. He thought the butler was hiding something, and his calm smile only reinforced that feeling. Owl marveled at how quickly Albus had figured out all the details, before Albus simply laughed and suggested, Let's ask the adventurers to search the village. Maybe they'll find the murder weapon. Then the boy walked confidently in the opposite direction. I want to speak to him personally, he said. Albus nodded and followed, exchanging a brief, almost conspiratorial glance with him. The Countess didn't understand what was happening. Are you implying that you already know the criminal? She asked, looking from Owl to the butler. Skepticism appeared on her face. Mrs. Mole said they didn't see anyone suspicious. How did you come to that conclusion? She asked in disbelief. Owl cautiously replied, I don't want to admit it, but I'll explain. Some of the first witnesses deliberately lied to us. He remembered 3 men who said they had been drinking all night and could remember nothing. They were the ones, said Al, who deliberately hid the truth. Did you notice? He continued. Everyone says they saw Halls lying near their house, but no one could say the exact time. How did they get the idea that it happened at night? It's strange, the boy added. Everyone mentions night, even though no one saw it. So they were covering for someone. He took a deep breath. The peasants are in solidarity. They knew who was guilty, but they hid the name even from the nobles, and I understand why. After pondering, he finally said, "The criminal is not an outsider. He is someone important among the villagers, someone who greets every distinguished guest." Owl looked around, and his gaze stopped at the old man. "Do you understand who I'm talking about?" he asked quietly. The headman rubbed his eyes, then laughed wearily and bitterly. "I can't hide anything from you, boy. Yes, it was me." The Countess looked at him with pity. "Why, Mr. Headman? Why did you do this?" He answered quietly but firmly. "Gals wanted to kill Aulus and force Mira to become his wife. I could not allow this. He got what he deserved." The headman looked up with difficulty. "I am grateful to all for everything. He gave us a new life. I love these people like my own children, but I couldn't keep quiet after his threats." The Countess and Albus exchanged glances. "And the weapon? Where is it?" the woman asked. "We didn't find anything," Owl said thoughtfully. "It wasn't an iron weapon. Maybe a stone made of bitter salt? Chief, confirm." He raised his head in surprise. "Yes," he said after a pause. "It's salt. We were preparing it for a holiday. I dissolved one piece in water after an incident." "So we found the murder weapon?" the Countess said, sighing with satisfaction. Albus laughed softly. "Yes, now the picture is complete. The truth has finally been revealed." But the Countess suddenly changed her tone. "They say that the village has been attacked by goblins and orcs lately. Is that true?" The headman blinked in surprise. "Orcs?" "Yes, sometimes they come out of the forest, but they do almost no damage," he replied, bewildered. But the Countess insisted. "Perhaps they are the ones to blame for the attack and the destruction of evidence." Her face remained cold. "The wound on Mr. Phileil's head is typical of a blow from a club carried by orcs," she said, searching Albus's eyes for confirmation. Albus raised his head and laughed. "Yes, ma'am, that's right. It turns out it was a monster attack. Woe to the unfortunate nobleman who fell victim to the beast." His voice was ironic, but no one dared to object. "Then help me make the official report," said the Countess. Albus nodded. "I'll do it myself. The case has been ruled a simple one, an orc attack on the Marquis's second son." The gray-haired man looked at the woman slyly. "If that's your version, madam," he said, "I'll sign it without objection, for a fee." She smiled coldly. "Oh, I'll pay, but the price won't be in gold alone." Countess Bowser raised her gaze thoughtfully, then squinted slyly. "And if we consider it gratitude that Owl will go to the capital?" Her words stunned everyone present, especially the young man. Albus smiled slightly. "The offer is tempting. It's simply impossible to refuse." The Countess replied coldly. "I've been taking care of this village for a long time, so it's time for it to repay me with a deed." The headman suddenly exclaimed, panting with excitement. "If anyone is to blame, punish only me. Don't touch the people." Albus looked at him calmly. "Attempting to murder the Earl's son is a serious crime. The punishment may fall not only on you, but also on the inhabitants who cover you." Then he added softly, "Let me help. But now you must act on our plan and not argue. Understand?" His voice was quiet, but full of authority. The headman sighed with relief. "If we come under the protection of the Duchy of Adams, nothing threatens us. They don't think in terms of money and power. That's rare among aristocrats." Albus only tilted his head slightly. "And yet, if Owl refuses, others will come. And then not only he will suffer, but your entire community." The young man listened silently, then nodded seriously. "I understand. I am grateful to Miss Mule and all of you. If my departure will protect the village, I agree." The headman bowed his head again. "It was all because of me. I'm sorry, boy." Owl raised his hands, as if fighting back. "Don't bow your head, elder. You were thinking about the people, about the safety of Mira. You simply did what you had to." He concluded softly. "But from now on, let's resolve everything without violence. There are other ways." The elder replied quietly but sincerely. "Thank you all." The next day, the district announced, "The son of the Marquis of Phileil has been attacked by monsters." The few villagers who knew the truth swore to remain silent for the rest of their lives. Soon Halls came to his senses, but Countess Moole whispered with a gentle smile, If you try to do anything, I will remind you of what your butler did. And the man fell silent forever. The incident was hushed up, and the harvest festival was a success. According to the results of the vote, Owl and Mira's stall took first place. People celebrated as if the tragedy had never happened. In a few days, Owl was to leave for the Duchy of Adams. His parents came to see him off. "Eat your fill, don't get sick," his mother begged. "Bring something from the capital," his father added, hiding his tears. The headman shook his hand. "It's not easy in the capital, but you'll cope, I believe. We'll wait for your return." Owl smiled and thanked him for his trust. Mira ran up, out of breath with sparkles in her eyes. "When you return, I will become a worthy bride." The young man was confused, blushing with surprise. Owl furtively glanced at his mother, who was standing behind him and smiling mysteriously. What is she up to? He thought, not understanding why everyone was looking at him so kindly. Suddenly Mira came closer and, without saying a word, kissed him on the cheek. The young man froze, his eyes wide open. She stepped back and, blushing, said, "This is a charm for fidelity, so that you won't be tempted by other beauties in the capital." Owl touched his cheek, muttering, "It's already begun." It was time to leave. He was about to reach the gate when Mira stopped him. "Wait, I almost forgot." She handed him a neatly folded letter. "Read it as soon as you arrive in the capital." Owl was surprised to see that it was a message from her. The boy frowned skeptically. He must be joking. Maybe his mother persuaded him? He thought, carefully putting the letter in his pocket. As the carriage moved, he waved. Mira, the headman, and his parents stood at the gate, shouting wishes of a safe journey. Sitting down next to Albus, All heard, "We haven't had time to talk. You must be wondering why the duchy needs your village." "Obviously not for relaxation," the boy replied confidently. Albus smiled. "You're right, as always. The young duchess wants to taste your dishes, so you will teach her chefs your recipes. And of course, you will receive a generous salary," Albus added. Owl laughed. "I thought so, but I must warn you, my products are not cheap." Albus raised an eyebrow. "Don't ask for too much. The duchess doesn't like greedy people." Along the way, Albus taught the young man how to drive a carriage, telling him about the capital, its customs, people, and grand markets. The boy listened with bated breath. Finally, the tall towers and shining roofs of the Duchy of Adams appeared ahead. "Here it is! The capital!" exclaimed Owl in delight. His eyes shone with dream and a foreboding of a new destiny. Owl finally opens the letter that his mother asked him to read as soon as he arrives in the capital. "If we're going, it's time to find out the truth," he says. But as soon as his eyes run over the first lines, a scream breaks from his lips, echoing across the field. In the first words, the mother was writing to her dear son, who had probably already arrived in the capital. This message was about the future, about their village, and about the choice she had made on his behalf. She admits that her son is extremely gifted, and as a mother, she cannot allow his knowledge to be limited to a small village. He is destined for more than a craft in everyday fields. Therefore, at her request, Mr. Albus agreed to arrange for Owl's entry into the Metropolitan Academy of Rune Magic. The exams would begin in the spring, so the boy had a few months to prepare. His mother wrote further that after 3 years of study, he should set out on a journey to see the world and earn his own living. Only by seeing something different will you understand your place in this world. She also remembered Mira. She came to her and asked to be taught how to become a worthy bride. "She is trying, son," her mother wrote, "but if you find another, I will comfort the girl myself." It went on to say that Owl could stay at the duchy's estate until he joined, and then move into the academy's dormitory and support himself. This is the first step into adulthood, and now he understands the meaning of Mira's words before leaving. But at the same time, he is overcome with indignation. No one even asked his consent. However, thinking about it, he smiles. His mother is a wise woman. She knew that if he agreed to travel, he would want to enter the academy, and to see the world is truly a temptation. Owl understands. All decisions are fair. The Duchy of Adams looks like a good place. The people are friendly. So why not live here and try a new life? Albus, noticing the boy's emotions, asked, "Did you read to the end?" And smiling, added, "I hope we will collaborate with you for a long time." Owl nodded. Their fates were already intertwined. The butler said with a smile, "We'll talk about the entrance in the spring. In the meantime, the capital awaits us." The young man looked out the window, captivated by the grandeur of the ducal estate that was visible ahead. As soon as he stepped inside, all the servants lined up to greet the guest with respect. He was shown to his assigned room and then invited to the bathhouse. After a hot bath, the boy was taken to the refectory, where the tables were bursting with exquisite dishes. Owl sat stunned. He had never seen such luxury. Albus watched him eat and asked quietly, Do you like our house? Owl only nodded. He lacked the words to describe what he saw. After dinner, the boy was invited to the main hall. There, a girl in a luxurious dress appeared before him. She smiled and said, "I am Alice von Adams, the eldest daughter of the Adams house." "Excuse me for being blunt," she said, "but are you really the creator of those same sweets?" Owl replied, embarrassed. "Yes, I'm just a commoner. I apologize if I'm speaking out of etiquette." To change the awkward atmosphere, he held out a basket of muffins. "Please, try some." The girl took one, took a bite, and her eyes lit up with surprise. Alice grabbed his hands. "This is exactly what I need. It's incredible that a child created such perfection." Her voice rang with sincere admiration. Owl said awkwardly, "It's an honor to meet the Duchess." She laughed. "Just call me Alice. And don't be so formal. We're almost the same age." "You are my invited guest," she said. "As long as you are here, you belong in my house. Don't worry, we will not ask anything beyond your capacity." Owl looked at Albus and replied, "If Miss Alice permits, I will remain in the duchy until spring. It is a great honor for me." She was embarrassed by his politeness. "You are too respectful. We are almost the same age," the girl said. "Can I ask you a question?" he asked. "Why did you insist on meeting me?" Owl asked. Alice looked down thoughtfully. "There are several reasons. First of all," she said, "I was interested in seeing a person who created something new in confectionery. Second, I have a small request." "There's a big banquet coming up soon," Alice explained, "and I want you to help organize it. It won't be complete without your sweets." She promised to pay all the expenses and teach her cooks his recipes. "And if you want, you can cook everything yourself. My birthday is in 2 weeks. Owl felt the blood rush to his face. "So this is why I was invited?" But he decided not to argue. This was a chance, and he had no right to refuse it. "A cake," he thought. "No one has seen it here. If I make the first cake in this world, it will be a real miracle." And his heart was filled with the excitement of a creator. "If my client is the Duchess herself," Owl smiled, "then why not take advantage of the opportunity? Maybe someday she will help me too." He felt that this exchange was beneficial for both. Owl nodded slowly and calmly said that he accepted the young Duchess's offer. Alice, clasping her hands in front of her, beamed with joy, her eyes alight with childlike delight and relief. The boy threw up his hands and said that the details of the banquet could be discussed later. Instead, he asked Albus and Miss Alice to get some fresh milk and eggs to start the new recipes. Alice exclaimed happily that they had just bought a bag of sugar at a discount yesterday, but Owl smiled. "Don't worry, I have mine." His words aroused genuine curiosity. Both the Duchess and Albus looked at each other in surprise. "So you were the one who delivered sugar to the capital?" they exclaimed in unison. The young man only smiled, nodding slightly confusedly. "Please don't tell anyone about this," he begged. Albus assured them that they would keep it a secret, although he added, "Now all the nobles are hunting for this sugar." Alice leaned closer. "Who are you really?" The guy was embarrassed, and scratching the back of his head, laughed. "A regular farmer, Miss Alice. I just like experimenting with food." From then on, he had busy days. At first, the chefs treated him with distrust, but after a few days of work, they recognized his talent with respect and began to consult on every little thing. Eventually, the entire kitchen was filled with admiration. Even the senior chef admitted that the boy had a taste and sense of harmony that could not be taught. So, imperceptibly, Owl became the estate's head chef. One day, Alice came into the kitchen. When she saw the new dishes, she couldn't help but taste some more hot pies and, with a happy look, said, "This is divine." The preparations for the ball were thorough. 500 guests were invited. While Owl prepared samples of the dishes, the Duke and Duchess tasted them. Pleasant, sincere people who listened to his advice with interest. A large meeting was held at the manor. Albus, the cooks and servants, along with Owlus, discussed the menu, the order of serving, and even the arrangement of the tables, so that every guest would be satisfied. For such a large number of guests, everything had to be calculated down to the smallest detail. The most difficult thing was the shortage of some ingredients, so Owl looked for substitutes and came up with new flavor combinations. Among the desserts, they finally settled on an apple pie. Simple but flavorful. There was enough dough and apples, and the servants immediately liked it. The last few days in the kitchen had become noisy. The maids would often come running in, joking and asking Owl what girls he liked, maybe out of curiosity, or maybe out of genuine sympathy. Finally, he asked Alice not to go into the kitchen. She frowned, but he explained, "We all want to surprise you on your birthday, and you're stopping us from keeping it." Thus passed the days of the young cook. Time passed quickly, and each new dawn brought the Duchess's birthday closer. Tension and excitement grew along with the aromas of freshly baked pastries. When the menu was finally approved and all the ingredients had been ordered, Owl got a day off for the first time in a long time. A well-deserved respite after sleepless nights. This morning he decided to walk the streets of the capital. Eventually he came across a familiar face. Mr. Lebrant greeted him with a broad smile and a sincere greeting. Over a cup of tea, the young man told him the whole story. From the village to working in the duchy. Lebrant sighed. "You've been through a lot. If you need help, don't hesitate to ask." Owl smiled, because that was exactly what he wanted. "I have a small request, old friend," he said. Lebrant raised an eyebrow in surprise, not expecting such a serious tone. After talking with the merchant, Owl headed to the real estate agency. He greeted politely and said he was looking for a house to rent, a modest but cozy one, not far from the academy. Although he could have stayed at the estate after the holiday, the young man decided to live on his own. "I don't want to be a burden," he thought. "I want my own space and peace to work." So he contacted the realtor again. The realtor assured him that he would now select a suitable option and was already on his way to it. When the man saw the teenager in front of him, he was confused. "You're still a child?" Owl answered seriously. "I need a house, near the academy. I have documents." He handed over the paper he had received at the duchy. The agent read it carefully and, turning pale, realized that he was faced with a person who it was best not to anger. He immediately apologized for his rudeness and asked for a minute to think about the best option. Owl thought that it was a good thing he had consulted with Albus earlier. Half an hour later, a majestic two-story building appeared before them, shining with cleanliness and tidiness. "Here, look, young man, what do you think?" the agent asked. "A two-story mansion, 4 rooms, a garden, 20 minutes to the academy on foot," the man described. "And a huge living room, the pride of this house." Owl, having crossed the threshold, was delighted. The living room is really spacious, about 25 squares. "You could put a sofa here, or a small oven for baking," he thought with a smile. "The rent is 45 gold coins a month, or 9,000 if you buy," the realtor said. The boy thought for a moment, then nodded decisively. A house like this was worth every penny. The young man hesitated, but then remembered that the duchy itself had recommended this realtor. He smiled with relief and agreed to the purchase. The man, impressed by the boy's determination, offered to discuss the terms of the deal. The agent was even more confused when he heard that he intended to buy, not rent. But Owl silently took out his wallet and laid out the sum on the table, 9,000 gold. "Payment immediately," he said calmly. Within a few days, the house was filled with furniture. It was now his own dream house. The boy showed the letter from the duchy to the shop again, and the salespeople immediately became surprisingly attentive. Looking around, he was surprised. The furniture looked luxurious, even extravagant. "Isn't it thanks to that letter that I got all this?" thought Owl, although the expenses were indeed great. In the window, he noticed a fox mask that looked like a Japanese one from his home world. For a moment, his heart sank. The memory of his past life flashed through him like a breath of cold wind. When he got home, he decided to insulate the rooms. He could have used magic, but the usual warmth from a fire would have looked easier. "I want it to be beautiful, like in a real house," he thought. That same day, Owl entered the forge, where a burly bearded man was hammering hard on hot metal. The boy cautiously greeted the master and apologized for disturbing him. The blacksmith raised his head. "A heater stove, you say? What is it?" he wondered, wiping the sweat from his forehead. The young man took a sheet of paper and began to draw a diagram, explaining the principle. Gar, as he would later be called, stared at the blueprints for a long time, realizing that he was looking at something new, something he had never seen before. "This design, are you sure it will work?" he grumbled. "Let's try," Owl replied. "And the budget, let it be up to 100 gold pieces." The blacksmith whistled. "Wow, but for that kind of money we'll make it from the best ore." Gar suggested using Granz ore, which is mined near the Granz volcano. It can withstand heat and retain heat. "Perfect for your thing," he said. The production was supposed to take 3 days. It was possible to use simple iron, but then the device would quickly burn out. Owl agreed. "Agreed, I will wait. By the way, my name is Garvins, but just call me Gar," said the blacksmith. "And I am Owl," replied the boy. The new acquaintance seemed pleasant to both of them. It was evening. The day had passed unnoticed, but fruitfully. The young man thought that all the products for the ball should have already arrived at the estate, so tomorrow we could start preparing. As expected, the duchy supplied only the finest ingredients. "Now the main thing is not to let Miss Alice down," he said to himself, preparing to impress everyone. The next morning, the kitchen was buzzing like a beehive. The servants were bustling, the cooks were rhythmically working with their knives, and by evening everything was ready. There were only a few hours left until the holiday. But at night, when the whole estate was asleep, 3 men in black cloaks quietly crept through the courtyard. The maid opened the door for them and whispered, "The way is clear." The intruders quickly moved towards the kitchen. Their footsteps echoed faintly in the darkness. They opened the refrigerators and began breaking dishes, throwing food overboard, destroying everything. Suddenly a cry rang out in the night. "Lord All! Trouble!" The cooks ran into his room, frightened and out of breath. "Something has happened in the kitchen." The young man came running and froze. The floor was strewn with flour, broken eggs, dirt, and broken glass. The air smelled of spoiled wine. "Everything was fine yesterday," one of the cooks exclaimed. "What happened?" All stared in silence, unable to believe his eyes. "Thieves," whispered the head cook. "They came in at night." The boy's heart sank. It was a disaster on the eve of the ball. Another servant explained. The door had been opened from the inside. The guards had mysteriously fallen asleep, and the new maid had disappeared. Everything pointed to deliberate sabotage. Albus, hearing about the incident, ran to the kitchen. "Someone wanted to ruin the celebration," he said grimly. "Losses?" "Everything was destroyed. Food, drinks, even the dishes." Owl turned pale. Even an ordinary person understood that this was a disgrace to the duchy. The ball was to begin in a few hours, and there was no kitchen. But he controlled himself in an instant. "Albus, I need eggs, milk, dishes, and alcohol, all in an hour," he ordered. His voice was as hard as steel. "Don't despair," he shouted to the cooks. "We have until midnight. Let's start over." But they just threw up their hands. There were no more basic ingredients left. Then All concentrated, raised his hands, and in front of the astonished servants, eggs, flour, milk, wine, and spices began to materialize in the air. The magic flashed like lightning. "The ingredients are my concern," he said confidently. "You cook according to the recipes you remember." The head chef rolled up his sleeves. "Of course, Mr. Ollie, we will do everything right." The boy remembered that he had a supply of hunting products in the basement. "We'll use everything we have," he whispered. "This time we can't afford to lose." Ayul orders the cooks to get back to work. They instantly pull themselves together and distribute duties in an organized manner. Servants bring in ingredients, knives jingle, the kitchen comes alive again. A spirit of teamwork is in the air. Experienced chefs, full of determination, demonstrate the skills acquired over years of service to the noble house. They quickly fry meat, stew vegetables, arrange dishes on plates. Every movement is precise and confident. The guy watches carefully but sighs. No matter how hard you try, the meat still takes too long to cook. An idea flashed in his eyes. He wants to find a way to speed up the process without sacrificing quality. A black metal board catches his attention. Owl picks it up and exclaims, "Here's the solution!" Everyone stops, not understanding what he's up to, but the young man is already acting decisively. "All the meat dishes are mine now," he announces. The cooks look at each other, not believing that he can handle it alone. But in response, they hear only a calm, "You just trust me. I'll show you a new way of cooking. Today at the ball." Owl smiles. "But don't get distracted for now. Time is working against us." His confidence spreads to others like fire. Suddenly, Albus runs into the kitchen, breathless and alarmed. "I got the eggs and milk, but there's no alcohol or dishes left. They've sold everything," he says. "How is that?" Owl wonders. "Who could have bought it all in one night?" Albus replies, "The Sagusi Trading Company. They work with the Philel family." And everything immediately falls into place. "Philel," the boy repeats. It was this house that had recently figured in that unfortunate case. "So this is revenge on the Duchy of Adams?" Albus just sighs heavily. It seems that it is. "This is a trap," says Owl, "and soon they will come to see for themselves our despair." But at that moment a servant runs into the kitchen. "Mr. Albus, the merchants have arrived." "I'll come with you," the young man says. "I want to see who's blackmailing us." Then he turns to the cooks. "Keep up the pace. The kitchen is yours." 3 men with confident smiles enter the main entrance. They greet each other politely, saying that they have heard about the misfortune and are ready to generously sell the missing goods. Owl, standing behind Albus, clenches his fists. Everything became clear. This was a plot by the Philel family, who wanted to disgrace the duchy and ruin the ball. He leans into the butler's ear and quietly says a few words. Albus nods and, feigning surprise, clarifies. "You are, I suppose, representatives of the Sagusi Company?" "Yes, that's right," they proudly reply. "Excellent," Albus says calmly. "Then we don't need your help." The merchants are hastily silent, not believing what they've heard. "Look elsewhere for buyers," Albus adds, turning his back on them. The merchants' faces flare with anger. "You'll regret it," one of them shouts, but the door is already closing in their faces. As they leave, Albus turns around. I did as you asked, but explain what it all means. Don't worry, Owl replies. You'll see everything soon. Suddenly, hurried footsteps are heard from above. A servant runs down the stairs, panting, but with joy on his face. Mr. Albus, representatives of the Lebrant Trading House have arrived. A moment later, baskets of food, sacks of flour, barrels of wine, a whole caravan of aid appear before them. Albus stares in amazement at this miracle. How did you know? He asks. Owl smiles. Mr. Lebrant is an old friend of mine. I asked him to be on the alert. I had a feeling something like this would happen. So you predicted all this? Albus wonders. Not exactly, the young man shrugs. I just wanted to be safe, although there's still a problem with alcohol. I made some wine myself, Owl says, showing a basket of bottles. Try it. Albus narrows his eyes suspiciously but takes one of them. You're too young for alcohol, he grumbles as he pours a glass, but after the first sip his face changes. The wine smells of fruit and spice. The taste is deep and mature. That's amazing, says Albus. I've never tasted wine like this before. We're buying a batch for the estate. Owl smiles. Then let's consider it a deal. Meanwhile, the merchants, driven from the estate, stood at the gate in confusion. They promised to come running to us in a minute. What now? Grumbled one of them. But suddenly a man in a mask approached them. His voice sounded calm. I will buy everything. Immediately. The merchants became wary. Who are you? The one who knows the value of time. 100 gold pieces for all the goods, he said shortly. The merchants exploded with indignation. This is robbery. Our goods are worth 30,000. The masked man only chuckled. I don't care. Count Philel gave me the money. But it would be interesting to explain to him why you returned without a penny. His words made everyone pale. The merchants began to haggle in confusion. Okay, 10,000? No, 300 gold is the final price. The stranger replied coldly, without looking up. They finally agreed. The face of the man under the mask smiled faintly. The merchants, sullen and humiliated, trudged away, not realizing who had just beaten them at their own game. Owl hides under the fox mask. Convinced that the ball is about to begin, he returns to the kitchen. Life is in full swing there. Everyone is feverishly preparing dishes, trying to restore what was lost. The young man bursts into the kitchen with a burst of energy, apologizing for the delay. The cooks rush to him. We thought you had abandoned us, Mr. Ossel. The boy smiles awkwardly, blushing slightly. How is the work going? He asks. The head chef replies that everything is ready, except for the meat dishes. Owl smiles and pulls the tablecloth away from the strange device he has been hiding until now. He places a piece of meat on the hot surface, and a sizzle is heard. What kind of method is this? The cook wonders. A new style of cooking, Owl replies with a twinkle in his eye. I call it live cooking, he says. The dishes are born right in front of the guests' eyes. A crowd gradually gathers around, fascinated by the novelty of the spectacle. The young man puts on a fox mask, hiding his face. The guests, attracted by the aroma and the flame, surround him in a semicircle. He adds a second piece of meat, keeping the rhythm of his movements like a musician. Then he opens a bottle of his own wine and pours it directly onto the hot surface. The flames shoot up, illuminating the room, and the guests exclaim in delight. The first steak is ready, he announces. A line immediately forms. Everyone wants to taste the miracle dish, which they have never seen before. Noise, laughter, and exclamations fill the hall. The boy's hands move quickly, skillfully. The meat sizzles, the aroma fills the air. But suddenly Kadir's voice is heard. He announces the appearance of the culprit of the celebration. Alice slowly descends the stairs, wearing a luxurious dress that looks like a wave of pink silk. All eyes are fixed on her. Even the music fades. However, the girl's gaze suddenly stops in the center of the hall. There, amidst the fire and smoke, stands a mysterious chef in a fox mask frying meat on a strange device. She raises her hand in greeting, and he nods in return, as if they have known each other for a long time. Their brief exchange of glances surprises the guests. Despite all the difficulties, the celebration was a success. Everyone felt relieved and even delighted. No one knew what the kitchen had been through that night. People asked the maids where this food came from, but they only smiled mysteriously. Only Mr. Albus knows about this. The butler kept the secret silent, as he had promised. Owl looked at the tired Albus, who was barely standing, and thought, he can be trusted. He won't betray me even under threat of death. The desserts were a hit. They disappeared faster than they were served. Guests especially praised the delicate apple pies. Each piece was a work of art. The evening culminated in a large cake, personally created by Owl, decorated with sparkling berries and a caramel veil. Alice had the honor of tasting the first piece. She raises her fork, tastes it, and freezes for a moment. The taste is incredible. Tears of joy appear in her eyes. "This is wonderful," she whispers quietly. The girl looks at Aul, says his name tenderly, thanks him from the bottom of her heart. Her voice trembles, but you can hear genuine gratitude in it. Aul bows his head and congratulates her on the holiday. Then he claps his hands, setting the rhythm for the applause. The crowd supports him. The hall explodes with applause. The candlelight flickers with joy. As night falls on the estate and the guests disperse, the young man falls wearily onto the sofa in the great hall. He feels the warmth of the holiday lights gradually fading in his heart. Albus approaches and says, "You've outdone yourself today, Mr. Owl." He laughs back. "And you, Mr. Albus, haven't been far behind." Then they talk about the reward. The butler solemnly announces, "Your payment is 300 platinum coins, and a non-disclosure agreement for the recipes. If they are stolen, we will pay a fine." The boy does a quick mental calculation. It's about 300 million yen. His eyes widen. "That's a huge amount," he mutters. Albus explains that this amount includes compensation for the stress and damage caused by the Philo family. "Your recipes will change the menu of the entire duchy," he adds. "By the way, the Duke is delighted with your wine. He says it tastes of freedom and youth. There are 5 barrels left, but he wants to buy 10 more. A cunning glint flashes in Owl's eyes. "This is a wonderful opportunity," he thinks. "And the money, and the connection to the duchy. Just what is needed for the future. If they like it, I won't say no," he smiles. Albus nods approvingly. "A wise decision. Your work is appreciated." So, overnight, Al became a wealthy man and gained a stable source of income. In his heart, he is grateful and confident that this step has opened a new path for him. The next morning, he appears before the Duke's family. "I'm leaving today," he says calmly. The Duke and Duchess thank him sincerely. "If you ever get into trouble, the doors of our house are always open to you." The lady of the Adams household says with a smile that his desserts are divine, and his wine has the taste of nobility. She asks the young man to come whenever he has free time so that he can prepare something like it again. Alice adds that Albus told her about all the hardships the boy had to go through. She is sincerely grateful to him for the holiday, which was the best day of her life. The girl lowers her gaze and sadly says that the time for parting has come. Al wonders why the heiress of the house looks so depressed, as if saying goodbye forever. She puts her hand on her heart, becomes embarrassed, hesitates to confess, and finally asks permission to express one of her secret desires. "I'm leaving now, but I can make you some sweets from time to time if you want," he says with a gentle smile. The girl immediately agrees, her eyes lighting up with joy. The little lady grabs the boy's hand, squeezes it tightly, and promises that as soon as the cookies are gone, she will definitely visit him herself. Her voice trembles, but there is warmth in it. Albus goes out to escort the young man, thanks him for his work, and asks what he plans to do next. Owl shrugs his shoulders in confusion. "I don't know. Maybe you can tell me?" The butler thinks for a moment and finally says, "I rarely suggest this, because it's not for everyone. But would you like to try your hand at the maze?" "A labyrinth?" the young man asks in surprise. Images of dark caves, skulls, and cold stones come to mind. "What kind of place is this?" Albus explains. "There are 108 of them in Arturia. They are underground dungeons filled with monsters, but also with treasure. Many risk their lives for the loot or glory. There is one, the 4th maze, near the capital. It has 53 open floors. The danger level is medium. It would be wisest to start with it," Albus adds. "Only those over 15 who have an adventurer's license can get in. But the butler personally shows Owl in, calling him a disciple of the Adams house. The gates open. A path opens up ahead, as if carved into the rock itself. The walls shine with damp reflections. The air smells of stone and moss. The boy takes his first step into the unknown. He picks up a short, sticky stick from the floor and decides that it will be his weapon today. "Let's see how far I can go," he says to himself. He knows that every 5th floor is guarded by a mini-boss, a creature holding a valuable artifact. The guy hopes to defeat at least a few of these enemies. Focusing, he whispers a spell. Body strengthening, presence manifestation, concealment, spatial vision. A faint glow appears around him. The magic obeys his will. Having finished his preparations, he bursts from his seat. His footsteps echo through the stone corridors. "Forward!" he exclaims, feeling a rush of adrenaline. At the first turn, slimy creatures crawl out at him, like living walls. The young man beats them off with his stick, blow after blow, until they spread like spots on the stone. "As I thought, the first floors are easy," he says, wiping away sweat. "The next ones will be harder, but I'll manage." And he continues moving deeper. After passing 4 levels, he enters a huge hall, the 5th floor. Ahead lies a creature with a blade the size of a man. It seems to be a mountain troll. As he gets closer, it turns out to be a goblin king with a golden crown on his head. He roars, raising his sword, and rushes at the boy. Owl brings his hands forward, forming a water spear. "Aqua Lance!" he shouts. The arrow of water pierces the air and hits the monster squarely in the chest. The explosion of the water wave raises dust. But the boy does not relax. His heart beats fast. "Come on, I'm not finished yet," he shouts into the fog. When the smoke clears, only the golden crown remains on the stone. The enemy's body has disappeared without a trace. Victory has come too easily. Strange. Why is it so easy? He thinks. I guess the real test will begin after the 10th floor. In the corner of the cave, he notices a chest. Opening it, he finds a white bag inside. "My first loot," he says with a smile. Opening the bag, he sees a tiny seed of an unknown plant. It shimmers with a barely noticeable glow, as if absorbing the energy of the cave itself. "Seeds? Really?" He laughs, pouring a few grains into his palm. "This maze seems to be made for farmers, like me." After his victory, he climbs to the 6th floor. An unexpected sight opens up ahead. A vast plain bathed in soft light like a real world under the sky. The young man looks up and realizes that even though he is underground, he sees the sky, an illusion created by ancient magic. "So every 5 floors the environment changes," he whispers, fascinated by the new world. The clearing Owl steps out into reminds him of his native village, which he left only recently. His chest tightens, as if he really has never left it since the day he arrived in the capital. A magical bee escapes from the boy's arms. Her name is Quinn. She hums softly, as if greeting her owner, and spreads her transparent wings, full of golden radiance. The bee returns to all, sparkling in the air. It's several times larger than normal. The young man smiles. "Welcome, Quinn. It's good to have you around." She sits on his shoulder like a true friend. He remembers wanting to leave Quinn in the village, but she stubbornly refused. Her humming then sounded like she was swearing she would never leave him. "I'm going down deeper," he says. "Fly here, but be careful." Quinn buzzes back, rises higher, and disappears into the glow of the underground sky. Slowly but surely, Owl reaches the 10th floor. In a huge hall, creatures resembling wolves standing on 2 legs rush at him. A fierce fight begins. When it's all over, a piece of cloth falls to the ground. The boss's trophy. It's a cloak, black as night. And next to it, a new chest. Inside are seeds again. "You're kidding," he mutters. Having climbed to the 11th floor, he finds himself in the middle of a foggy swamp. The sun is hidden, the air is damp and heavy, every step sinks in the mud. At levels 12 and 13, the danger increases. The monsters are stronger, more aggressive. "Yes, the lower the worse," he says to himself, gripping his staff. In the hall on the 15th floor, a transparent cloud rushes at him, from which strange tentacles grow. It pulses like a living heart and attacks rapidly. The tentacles try to snatch the weapon from the young man's hands. He jumps back, barely managing to dodge. "Fast and unpredictable," he says hoarsely. "You have to move with lightning speed." The monster strikes from different directions, as if it is lashing with whips. The air whistles, stones fly in all directions. Physical attacks don't work, he realizes, watching the stick pass through the enemy's body without leaving a scratch. "Now that's interesting," he smiles. "That's exactly the kind of enemies I expected in a real maze. Too bad I had to wait until the 15th floor. Tentacles rain down from all sides. Owl spins, dodges, jumps, keeping calm. His movements are precise, like a dance amidst thunder. "I still don't have the strength," he admits to himself, but his eyes are shining with excitement. He's ready to show what he's capable of. The boy rises into the air, spreads his arms. "Thunder rain!" he exclaims. Black clouds gather overhead, and the first lightning bolt strikes the monster. The ground shakes, thunder shatters the silence. The boy lands, breathing heavily. The dust clears, and there is no trace of the enemy. A light puff of smoke billows around. "It looks like he couldn't handle the electricity," says Owl, looking at the black spot left by the impact. The guy smiles confidently. "So lightning is his weakness. Good to know." Then he goes to the chest that the monster was guarding. Opening it, he hopes for an artifact or gold, but seeds again. "Seriously?" he says disappointedly. "I'm an adventurer, not a gardener." But he still carefully puts the seeds in his bag. Descending further, on the 16th level, he again complains about the generosity of the maze. "Everything is for the farmers, nothing else," he mutters, chopping up another beast. Even on the 17th floor, he doesn't understand the meaning of these rewards. "Maybe one day I'll know what they're for, but right now it's just a mockery," he thinks. The 18th level greets him with darkness and an onslaught of monsters. Battle after battle, and the same thought keeps coming to mind. Why seeds? Every time he hopes that even a strong enemy will leave behind a real treasure. I risk my life, he says angrily, and all I get is a harvest. 20th floor. A storm of wind rises in the hall. In front of him is a giant eagle with many wings. Its gaze is fiery and fierce. At least not seeds this time, Owl mutters, clenching his fists. The eagle roars, raising a whirlwind. A new battle begins. Do you control lightning? The boy smiles. Let's see who's our stronger. He summons the thundercloud again, commanding the heavens to strike. Thunder explodes overhead. Lightning strikes the eagle, causing it to fold its wings, but the monster does not fall. Its body shines with sparks. The eagle soars, spreading its wings, flashing like living lightning. He's absorbing my magic? Owl exclaims, feeling fear mingle with excitement. A real test lies ahead. The magical creature that Owl is fighting on the 15th floor suddenly unleashes a beam sword. The beams cut through the air, and the boy, stunned by the spectacle, involuntarily freezes with his mouth open. Coming to his senses, he raises his hands and creates a barrier, a transparent shield of several layers of energy. The blow hits him, and the air splits with a roar, but the defense holds. As the enemy's magic dissipates, Owl clenches his fist. A ball of light flares in his hand, with lightning dancing around it. Let's see what you think of this, he whispers. Raising his hands to the sky, the boy shouts a call. A stream of light bursts from his body, from which a giant dragon of thunder and sparks is formed. Thunder Dragon, accept my challenge. The magical beast roars, sending up a wave of lightning, and swiftly charges at the winged enemy. The eagle tries to take flight, but the thunder beast wraps itself around it with bodies of electricity. The dragon clutches the enemy in its sparkling rings. The eagle screams in pain, and a roar fills the air like thunder in a storm. Both fall down. The ground shakes, creating a deep crater. Stones fly and dust rises in a column. While the monster is still moving, Owl summons stone chains. They wrap around the eagle's body, constricting it until it can no longer move. Standing on a hill, the boy looks down on his defeated enemy. You won't escape now, he says calmly, feeling the silence fill the cave. He is about to deliver the final blow, but something distracts him. A single feather slowly descends from the sky. It shines as if hardened by lightning. He catches it by the tip with his fingers and examines it carefully. The feather is strangely heavy, filled with magical energy. Interesting. This could be material for an artifact, he thinks. He remembers the 5th floor, when only the crown remained after the death of the Goblin King. So, if you defeat the enemy instantly, the body disappears, but if you weaken it, it leaves traces. He collects feathers, wing fragments, everything that survived the battle. A smile plays on his face. Now he understands how to get real trophies. If you can get a piece before it disappears, things don't dissolve with the body. This thought captivates him. The hunter in him awakens. We need to go back, All decides. There were a lot of goblins in the previous levels. You can collect fangs, meat, skin. The duchy will pay well. After a short rest, a mountain of trophies grows before him. Claws, fangs, feathers, and pieces of fresh meat. The smell of victory fills the air. He wipes the sweat and counts the weight. 100 kilograms of choice meat. He smiles. Now I know how to make good use of it. Mage, I forgive you all your seeds. However, if I see them again, the apologies will end, he jokes out loud. Looking at the markings, he realizes he is on the 16th floor. It is time to go deeper. Suddenly a scream pierces the silence, a piercing human cry. The boy stops. His heart races. Someone is in trouble. Experience tells us, this is not a monster. This is a human. Without hesitation, he rushes to the place where the voice came from, jumping over rocks and debris. Running out into the clearing, he sees a battle. A knight in battered armor holds back the onslaught of orcs, and a girl with cat ears lies next to him. Her eyes are half closed. Squeezing through the branches, he gets a better view of the battlefield, surrounded by monsters. The adventurers are desperately defending themselves, but their strength is running out. The whole group is on the verge of death. 3 of them are already lying motionless. Their leader can barely stand. 1 blow, and it will be over. The boy's gaze falls on the girl with the cat ears. She barely opens her eyes, as if trying to see who is in front of her, and whispers softly, "Who are you?" Eyal puts on a fox mask, the same one he once used at the fair. Time to test my invisibility, he thinks, pulling on his hood. The girl on the ground is trembling, but still begs, "Please, help." Her voice is weak. Bruises are darkening in the corners of her eyes, and her hands are shaking. The guy quickly scans the field. 4 wounded, only 1 still standing. He decides to act immediately. If I don't intervene, they'll be buried here, he says to himself and jumps up. His movement is lightning. He stands next to the knight, covering his back. The orcs rush to attack, But now they are met with a thunderstorm. Owl raises his hand. A flash of brilliance flashes in it. Balls of lightning form around him. The knight looks around, hoarsely asking, "Who the hell are you?" But the boy remains silent. His eyes shine like a storm before a storm. A sudden rainstorm, caused by Owl's magic, breaks out over the orcs and trolls, who are already preparing to attack. Lightning strikes directly at the monsters, and they roar and are charred, not even having time to escape. The blonde in tattered armor looks at his savior in amazement. The boy casts spells without a single spell, and the power of his magic destroys enemies with stunning power. After the brilliant blow, only one remains alive, the Red Ogre. He roars and, moving with incredible speed, rushes straight at Owl. The boy assumes a fighting stance, leans forward slightly, and clenches his fists. "The spell was strong, but this beast is different," he mutters, preparing for a new clash. Raising his hand, Owl begins to cast a new spell. "I'll show you what real lightning is," he says, and a glowing trident of pure energy forms above his head. "Spark Spear!" he shouts, and the trident transforms into a lightning spear that plunges straight into the enemy's belly. A magical blow splits the air, hitting the monster squarely in the forehead, and its head splits in half, like a cracked stone. The adventurers watching this freeze in shock. They have never seen such a level of mastery of storm magic. A true master stands before them. A lightning spear pierces the ogre's body through and through. The huge body falls to the ground, releasing the hammer with a thud that echoes throughout the valley. Standing on a hill, the boy calmly looks down. He's held out a bit, but he's still a long way from the creatures from the sacred mountain, he says, wiping the sweat from his forehead. The two adventurers, who were barely able to stand, exhale with relief. Their faces finally relax. The danger is over. The golden-haired knight, still trembling from the tension, covers his eyes and says, "Thank you, whoever you are. You saved us all." He runs to his friends, who are lying unconscious, bends over them, and whispers, "We are alive. It's all over." Owl watches them and sees that 3 of the 4 are barely breathing. The leader can't pull them out by himself, so the boy decides to help. He clasps his hands together and whispers a mass healing spell. Light spreads around, and the wounds on the bodies of the wounded begin to heal before his eyes. The knight looks at his hands in surprise. The cuts have disappeared. But when he raises his head, he sees that their savior is already running away into the forest. "Stop! Who are you?" he shouts, rushing after them. He wants to know the name of the one who pulled them out of the jaws of death. Owl pauses for a moment. If he remains silent, he will be pursued. "My name is Ona," he says shortly, without even looking back. Then he turns and runs on, disappearing into the trees, his black cloak flapping in the night air. Behind him, the words are heard. "We are the Shining Wing Squad. We will definitely thank you, Ona." The knight's voice trembles but is full of sincere gratitude. "Shining Wing," the boy repeats in his mind, running into the shadow of the forest. So it is from them that the future elite of marine rank adventurers will grow. Reaching the 10th floor, he finds the place where he left his companion Quinn. "That's enough for today," he sighs. "You've done well. It's time to rest." He calls his bee, but a whole swarm flies in response. The air fills with a buzzing sound like hundreds of tiny bells. The boy is surprised to realize that Quinn has found a local nest and defeated their queen. She is now the new queen. He smiles. "Good job, girl. Looks like there will be plenty of honey now." He gently strokes her back, and the swarm sings around her. Several weeks pass. All returns to the ducal estate. There, in the silence of his house, he decides to make himself a rocking chair, and he copes with this task brilliantly. He stuffs the cushions with the feathers of a thunder eagle he defeated in the labyrinth. The softness and springiness make the chair surprisingly comfortable. "The perfect place to relax," he says, sitting down. Pillows under the back and head support the body, giving a feeling of complete weightlessness. He later learns that the many-winged monster was called the Thunder Eagle, an A-rank creature whose feathers and meat are worth a fortune. Smiling, All leans back in his chair. "A week of work and the result is worth every hour," he thinks. "Maybe sell a few of these? The profit will be considerable." Before filing for a patent, Owl decides to tidy up his house. After weeks of working on the chair, he left behind a mess: drawings, tools, wood chips, and glue stains covering almost everything. Looking around, the boy sighs. Living alone in such a big house is hard. Even if you clean it up, the mess will still come back. His voice echoes in the empty rooms like a lonely echo. He claps his hands, smiling. "Why bother?" he says. "I'll just hire someone." The thought forms in his head: a housekeeper is needed. But to avoid making a stupid decision, Owl decides to consult with someone he trusts. He needs an experienced perspective to make sure he's making the right decision. Soon he is already visiting Mr. Lebrant. The old friend carefully examines the rocking chair he has made with his own hands and does not hide his delight. "It's incredible," says Lebrant, swaying. It seems to calm the soul. I want one like that for myself. His eyes shine like a child experiencing a miracle for the first time. The man leans closer, whispers with a smile. I'm ready to pay any money for this miracle. But let's get back to the main thing. The best thing is not to hire a maid, but to buy yourself one. These words shock all. Buy it? He asks. Lebrant nods seriously. The slave will fulfill all your needs, both at home and on your travels. She will never betray or reveal secrets. You're a special guy, the man adds. Your secrets are not for other people's ears. A slave is not just an assistant, he's your shadow. Owl is silent. He knows that slavery is a common occurrence in this world, but after living in Japan, it is difficult for him to accept the idea of buying a person. This is the best option for you, Lebrant insists, and I will be your guarantor during the deal. Don't worry about the formalities. The guy bows gratefully. He understands that he won't be able to do everything on his own. If he's constantly busy with household chores, he won't have time to create. Okay, he says. I guess you're right. Together they approach a 3-story building in the center of the capital, a luxurious home owned by the city's most notorious slave trader. Above the entrance hangs a coat of arms with a golden key. I warned the owner, Lebrant says, so just describe your wishes and he'll find the right person. The guy nods, clenching his fist nervously. Inside, he is greeted by a stately man in expensive attire. So, you're looking for a maid? He asks, taking a pen to jot down the terms. I don't need much, All replies. Just so she can keep the house in order, and maybe accompany me on my travels. I plan to become an adventurer. The guy is embarrassed, touches his cheek. It's better if she's about my age. And a woman. The slave trader writes everything down, showing no emotion. I understand, he says. By the way, we don't take into slavery gambling debtors or people with bad character. You can rest assured we only have proven candidates. The owner invites this boy into the large hall. I will show you those who meet your requirements. You can choose for yourself. Owl's heart begins to beat faster. 7 girls appear before him, 5 humans, a dog girl, and a cat girl. Each briefly states her name, age, and skills. Mr. Owl, did you like anyone? The merchant asks. You can talk to anyone in person. The guy hesitates and says, I want to talk to 3. The first person invited is girl number 4. She bows low. Thank you for the chance to talk, sir. I need someone who can take care of the house but isn't afraid of adventure, he says. In the future, I plan to go into labyrinths. The girl looks down. You must be wondering why I don't have a right eye and a left hand. It happened in battle. But I can work and even fight. I'm not afraid of danger. The boy smiles. I'm only 10, he admits. But I hope you don't mind my age. I'm entering the Magic Academy in the spring. There won't be much time. Don't worry, she replies. I finished it myself. If you need, I'll help you with your studies. Aiul closes his eyes and says quietly, You've lost a lot, but you're strong in spirit and talented. I think we could handle it together. The next, 6th, is a dogman girl named Maroon. She is interested in the boy's origins, believing that he is the son of a nobleman. This confuses him. I'm not of noble birth, he says calmly. I'm just an ordinary artisan. The girl is a little embarrassed. Her tail droops, but the guy doesn't hold a grudge. The last, 7th, is called Yomi. She proudly declares, I will take on all the household chores and go with you anywhere. I promise you won't regret it. The boy looks at the girl, noting her calm beauty and inner dignity. I am an ordinary commoner, he says. Does that bother you? She replies softly, I will serve you, whoever you are. After meeting with all the candidates, Owl concludes, the 7th girl is truly special. She combines strength of character and frank sincerity. He feels that he can trust her. The shop owner approaches him, asking who he has chosen. The guy, a little embarrassed, says that he has already made his decision. After a short pause, he announces, I'll take the 4th and 7th. They made the best impression, both in soul and determination. The slave trader smiles, puts a seal on the document, and announces, the deal has been successfully concluded. From now on, both girls belong to the new master. Together they walk along a bustling shopping street, among shops and the aromas of spices, heading towards Allah's estate. The guy walks away in silence. Inside he is torn by conflicting thoughts. He bought people. But what now? How to treat them? How to behave? The girls, noticing his aloofness, approach. Sir, are you okay? Yomi asks. You've been quiet for a few minutes. He shakes his head. Yes, everything is fine. Although he himself understands, there is no going back. Now they are his responsibility, and he must act with dignity. They approach the 2-story mansion. This is our home, he says. Feel free. The girls look at the luxurious rooms in amazement. For slaves, it's almost a fairy tale. In the living room, the boy stops in front of them. Let's introduce ourselves again. Now, not as master and slave, but as people who will live together. He bows slightly, closes his eyes. My name is Al. Such politeness astounds the girls. They have never seen such an attitude from the owner. Luna, a girl without an eye and an arm, says awkwardly, Sir, you don't have to bow so low to the slaves. People might misunderstand. Oh, I didn't know. The guy laughs. I don't have an aristocratic upbringing. Then let's get to know each other for real. Luna says quietly, I have no name. Call me whatever you like. I am good with a sword and I know my way around the house. Yomi answers confidently, My name is Yomi. I can clean, cook, and I'm quite good with a dagger. If necessary, I can protect you. Yomi smiles slyly and adds, And I'm also good at adult pleasures. I can show you tonight. Luna instantly blushes. Shut up, you fool! As long as I'm here, there won't be any obscenities. Her indignation is so sincere that even Al can't hold back his laughter. Watching the girls argue, the boy sighs with a smile. It seems they'll find a common language faster than I thought. His gaze falls on the blonde. Luna's hair shines in the moonlight. I guess, Luna, he says quietly. That name suits you. From now on you are Luna, the boy repeats aloud. Do you mind? The girl looks up, tears glistening in her eyes. On the contrary, she says in a trembling voice. It's the most beautiful name I've ever had. Thank you. Ayol smiles in confusion. He understands. This girl has gone through pain that is hard to imagine. Her tears are not from sadness, but from relief. Okay, he says gently. Let's discuss our business over dinner. Today is a day to celebrate a new beginning. The girls set the table, but instead of sitting down next to him, they carefully lower themselves at his feet. Yomi even places the plate on her lap. What are you doing? The boy asks in surprise. Luna says with a smile, We're just thanking the host. You've cooked so much that all we have to do is finish the leftovers. Al sighs and smiles. Everything is different in this world. But today is not leftovers. This is our dinner together. Eat with me. The girls freeze at first, not believing what they're hearing. Then Yomi cheerfully exclaims, Then I won't refuse, and sits down at the table first. Luna moves more slowly, hesitantly picking up her fork, but smiles at the boy's sincerity. Yomi, on the other hand, enjoys her food without hesitation. They taste the first bites, and joy appears in their eyes. It's incredibly delicious, says Luna. Yomi agrees, laughing. If this is a regular dinner, I'll stay here forever. As the girls eat, Owl finally explains, I didn't buy you to serve, but because I can't trust strangers. I have secrets that can't be spoken of outside. He adds, I've already said, in the future I want to go down to the labyrinths and enter the Magic Academy. If you are by my side, it will be easier for me. Luna tilts her head. May I ask, sir, what secrets are you hiding? And are we allowed to know them? Her voice is quiet, but there is curiosity and concern in it.